This is Mr. Millward. May I help you?
Hi, Hank, it's Michael. Just checking to make sure I can't get in for some reason.
Oh,
It says waiting.
Oh,
Can you check on me?
I got you.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Yep, there you go. All right, Emily has given me back my hosting capabilities. We are now streaming live on YouTube. And my name is Hank Millward. I am the director here at the Office of Facilities and Family Engagement at the VDOE, whose office provides support and administrative assistance to the State Special Education Advisory Committee. So that is my role. I've also got Lisa Crafton on, who is also going to be helping out with the minutes today. And we'll go around and everybody will introduce themselves, but I am going to turn this meeting over to Brian Sumo, who's our newly elected chair of the State Special Education Advisory Committee, and he will be the true host of the meeting. We are just here to provide any assistance that you need or to answer any questions that may come up. So, Brian, she's all yours.
Thank you, Hank. Appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to serving as the chair of the committee for the upcoming year. And I look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts and ideas throughout our meetings and presentations. Please feel free to speak up. The more involvement we have from our committee members, the better it's going to be for our students throughout the state. So with that being said, I just want to remind everybody of our functions as a state Sseac. They include defining plans for identifying children with disabilities, formulating and developing long-range plans that will provide services for children with disabilities, determining the unmet needs of children with disabilities within the state, developing priorities and strategies for meeting identified needs of children with disabilities, reviewing and making public comment on the state improvement plan, procedures for the distribution of funds under Part B of IDEA, and any rules or regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of children with disabilities, review findings and decisions regarding due process, procedures for parents and children, advise the state in developing corrective action plans to address findings identified in federal monitoring reports, and finally, to prepare and submit an annual report to the Virginia Board of Education. All right, so first let's go through and introduce our standing members of the committee. So when I say your name, please speak up and let us know who you are and what population you're representing. Again, my name is Brian Sumo. I am the chair of the state Sseac. I represent private schools throughout the state. Marguerite.
Good morning. I'm Marguerite Jeffa. I am the region president for Region 1, and I'm also the vice chair.
Hi, Dr. Pop.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Patricia Pop. I am serving as the secretary for the Sseac, and my role is I am the state coordinator for the education of homeless children and youth in Virginia. I also work on educational stability for our youth in foster care.
All right, Danny Allen Bronow.
Hi, I'm Danny Allen Bronaugh, and I represent the higher education contingency.
Suzanne Bowers.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Bowers. I'm the executive director of PTSI. We are the Parent Training Information Center for Virginia, and I'm an ad hoc member.
Daylana Carter Curry.
She's going to be running a little late today, Brian.
Okay. Dr. Castle.
He is not checked in yet.
Okay. Ann Downing.
I'm Ann Downing, and I represent people with disabilities in Region 5.
All right, thank you. Michael Garrison.
Mike Garrison, parent rep, Region 6 and board.
Justin Gatling.
He has not checked in yet.
Okay. Christine Jermeyer.
Hello, I'm Christine Jermeyer, parent representative for Region 4 and member at large.
All right, Claire Huerta.
Hi, I'm Claire Huerta. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs with the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities. And we're a state agency representing people with disabilities.
Erin Kelly.
Good morning, Erin Kelly, she, her, or they, them pronouns, Virginia Department of Social Services and the Educational Stability Liaison at the state.
Robert Schwartz.
Hello, I'm one of the people with disability.
All right. Sandy Thorpe.
She has not checked in yet.
Okay.
But Brian, Dr. Kent has signed in, so he can introduce himself as well.
You said Dr. Castle?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Castle?
Sorry about that. I'm a couple minutes late. Good morning. I'm Jeff Castle, Superintendent of Schools for the City of Waynesboro.
All right. Thank you. Michael Willen.
Good morning. Michael Willen, parent rep for Region 2, also member at large.
All right. Thank you.
And Brian, Dale Anna just checked in.
Oh, okay. Dale Anna, you want to introduce yourself?
She's connecting to audio.
Okay.
There she is. Dale Anna, you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, my name is Daliana Curry. I'm the teacher representative for the state Sseac.
Thank you, Daylanna. All right, and now we'll introduce our new members. We have 4 new members this year. So when I say your name, please come on and let us know who you're representing. Karen Phipps.
Good morning. I am the Director of Services for Children and Youth for the Virginia Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired. Thank you for having me.
Mary Frances Morse.
Hi, I represent Department of Juvenile Justice, and I work at the Bon Air Juvenile Correctional Center in Bon Air, Virginia, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Amanda Kelsey.
Good morning, I'm Amanda Kelsey. I'm a parent representative for Region 7.
All right, welcome, thank you. And finally, Kelly Lockerbie.
Hi, I'm Kelly Lockerbie. I am the parent representative for Region 3, also the co-chair of our local Sseac, and I'm excited to be here.
All right, great, thank you.
And Brian, if I can get my staff to introduce themselves, that would be great.
Yep.
So Tracy, you want to go first?
Good morning. My name is Tracy Lee. I'm the coordinator of family engagement at the Virginia Department of Education.
Chiquita?
Hank, I just sent you a text. Her computer just crashed and she's trying to get back on. I don't know if she's back on yet or not.
Yeah, I thought I readmitted.
I am. I'm back on.
There she is. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Tracy. So good morning, everyone. I am Chiquita Seaborn. I am the new family engagement specialist here at the department.
And then Lisa.
Good morning, all. I'm Lisa Crafton. I am the administrative assistant to Steffi, as well as your recorder for the Sseac. Nice to see all your faces.
And last but not least, Dr. Samantha Hollins has joined us, and we're doing a presentation later. But do you want to say a few words right now, Dr. Hollins?
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. It's especially great to be with you because I think this will be our last virtual meeting throughout the pandemic. So really excited about getting back together in person, and it's so great to see all of our continuing members, but I'm really excited about our new members to the State Special Education Advisory Committee. And I personally am very excited about our staff members from the Office of Facilities and Family Engagement. So really glad to be with you this morning. I'm looking forward to presenting an update and talking with you about the new Virginia Alternate Assessment Program in a bit. Thanks for having me this morning, Brian.
Thank you, Dr. Hollins. We appreciate you being here. All right. So next on our agenda, we need to approve the meeting agenda for today. So if anyone would like to motion to approve the agenda, go ahead.
Move
I
to
motion
approve.
the agenda. Danny.
Second, Michael.
All right. All right, now I will go through the list of members, and please let me know if you say aye or nay. Danny.
Aye.
Suzanne.
Aye, but I'm a ex officio, so I don't vote.
Okay, sorry. Diana.
Aye.
Dr. Castle.
Aye.
Ann Downing.
Aye.
Michael Garrison.
Aye.
Justin Gatling.
He's absent.
Okay. Christine Jermeyer.
Aye.
Claire Huerta.
Sorry, I don't vote on that.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Marguerite.
Aye.
Aaron Kelly.
Aye.
Karen Phipps.
Aye.
Pat.
Aye.
Robert Schwartz.
Aye.
Mary Frances Morse.
Aye.
Amanda Kelsey.
Aye.
I vote aye. Kelly Lockerbie.
Aye.
Sandy Thorpe.
Absent.
And Michael Willen.
Aye.
All right. Motion to approve the agenda goes through. And now I would like to approve the minutes from the previous Sseac meeting. Is there any discussion or changes that need to be made to those minutes? If you had a chance to look at them, or I can give you a few moments to look at them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. This is Christine.
I'll second, Michael.
All right. We have motion and a second. So please let me know your response when I call your name. Danny.
Aye.
Diana.
Aye.
Okay. Jeff Castle.
Aye.
Ann Downing.
Aye.
Michael Garrison.
Aye.
Christine Jermeyer.
Aye.
Marguerite.
Aye.
Aaron Kelly.
Aye.
Karen Phipps.
Aye.
Pat.
Aye.
Robert Schwartz.
Aye.
Mary Frances Morse.
Aye.
Amanda Kelsey.
Aye.
I will vote aye. Kelly Lockerbie.
Aye.
And Michael Willen.
Aye.
All right. The minutes are approved. All right. Next part of the agenda is to establish our goals for the year. I came up with some, but I certainly want to have some open discussion about them. I know this year was very different from previous years. I went back and I looked at not only this year's annual report, but the previous years to see kind of what we were working on, and came up with some goals, because I think we sort of stopped focusing on some things because of the pandemic, but I do want to refocus on those things. I think all of our work is important. We have a lot of things that we would love to do. But I looked and found the common themes for the past few years based on recommendations, public comment, and constituency reports. I've come up with these goals. First one is to identify programs or ways to help reduce the disproportionate discipline of students with disabilities, especially students of color, through research and data analysis. Inform parents of the importance of participation in their child's education and notify them of available resources to ensure their child's needs are being met academically, behaviorally, socially, and emotionally. Review the state Sseac bylaws and update as necessary. Continue to monitor teacher shortages and research proven teacher recruitment and retention strategies, as well as ensure they have the appropriate tools and support in their classrooms. Monitor legislation as it relates to students with disabilities and support bills for the betterment of students throughout the Commonwealth. And support the Virginia Department of Education with ideas to assist moving forward with initiatives they are tasked with as it relates to students with disabilities. Does anyone have any comments or would like to add anything to those?
Brian, just a quick.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick thought, Brian. On the first one, it's almost like this, the disparity between children of color and other youngsters is probably, and that might be a better term for that use of, and number one, if you could, that would work in there somehow.
Say it again.
Well, actually, when there's a disparity in the difference between our children of color and our other youngsters.
Okay.
The only thing I was going to say was I was able to reach out to all of the directors in Region 3 prior to the meeting. And the rural areas are the ones who are having the most trouble just establishing a viable Sseac committee.
Mm-hmm.
So they were looking for ways to recruit.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's been a very common theme since I've been here. You know, I've served on the Sseac for the Covington School Division over in Southwest Virginia, and we always had struggles having parent involvement and things like that. But that's a common theme definitely throughout the state, I believe.
Okay.
And Brian, on the local Sseac stuff, that is a focus that we're looking at in my office, but I certainly would like to get the perspective of our state Sseac on ways that they think we could also try to help the rural areas recruit more active members into the Sseac itself, not just to get them engaged in family work, but just in the Sseac itself. So just to give you all that heads up, we are working on that at the department right now.
Okay.
Brian, the VAP, the revamping of the VAP is kind of a hot topic right now because of the JEDA report. And I think we should focus on that this year as well, because it's very crucial for our kids who are graduating in the next few years.
Okay.
And I think a lot of our kids who really have suffered during the pandemic because special education services was not provided in the way, you know, previously before. And some kids could not learn virtually. And so I think a lot of kids who, you know, have to move over to the VAP because they cannot, you know, they really miss a whole year.
Sure, yeah.
Along the lines of making sure like special education teachers are educated and have resources, I also think that especially with the move to like co-teaching and inclusion, as special education or as general education teachers are coming out of college, they should be also trained and have background. I know they have everyone does the dyslexia training, but you know, I would love to see them have more of a training or classes or support about special education students so they're able to best support our kids.
Sure, and that's also something that we've talked about over the years too, and trying to figure out ways where we can, help them understand or learn techniques, interventions to work with students with special needs.
Yeah, can I second that? I think also we need to really focus on classroom management and behavior management, especially for trauma kids, because it's a completely different background. And the normal strategies are not working. The ABCs are not working for trauma kids. So we need to really look at new research. We need to teach that our teachers when they graduate. That's really crucial moving forward because mental health has increased tremendously. And it's really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, this is Karen Phipps. I think, we're talking about a shortage of special education teachers, but right now in Virginia, we have a really critical shortage of teachers for the vision impaired. We do not have enough, there are not enough incentives to get special education teachers to go into the specialty areas, and this is one of them. For example, with the infant toddler coordination areas, just in the Richmond area alone, out of the 12 of them, only 3 have a teacher for the vision impaired that they can even contract with. So that leaves us as a state agency and the education coordinators trying to fill the gap and provide more direct services, which is really not our role. And we have the same thing, in schools. We can't go into the school and teach, but there's such a critical shortage right now. And COVID didn't help that. They sort of helped some of those that were going to retire on out. But I know it's the same thing for SPED and autism, but the TVI situation is just really critical. Thank you.
That's good to know. Okay. Any
And
other
so I would
thoughts?
just like to I would like to piggyback off what she just said, and that's also the same for speech. My son's nonverbal. So you have speech therapists, but they're not qualified to deal with nonverbal students. So it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, that would be the same thing for orientation mobility O&M instructors. So it's the speech, O&M, and teachers for the vision impaired that we're really lacking.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I also think we're lacking psychologists in the school system.
Okay.
That's a huge issue right now too. I mean, things have gotten a little bit better, but that's still an issue.
All right.
So can I ask a question, Brian? As we're sitting here listing the staff shortages, how do you see the state Sseac filling the role or supporting VDOE in its efforts to recruit folks in these areas?
Well, it's certainly not an easy answer. I think just making people aware of the needs through the state. We needed to find ways to let legislators know that there's a definite need for these positions throughout the state. Obviously, that costs money. Looking at policy and regulations to go into effect to put those positions into place. Researching various recruiting efforts and retention strategies and things like that. I think there's a lot involved in it, but I do believe that, we can be supportive of that and find ways, talking together to combat the issue.
What's our relationship with higher education? And Danny, I don't know if that's a question that you could answer. How much are they hearing about the shortages?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are aware of the shortages. I think, and what, would be my report again this time is the RFPs and the timelines that the state puts out for those calls for traineeship money can be a real hindrance for programs that don't have sort of students in the pipeline. So not knowing that, or the RFP coming out and being due after the timeline that it starts, and you don't necessarily hear about the money until October. I mean, for instance, in our adapted program, we float some of the funds through our college just in order to help that out, because we know the money typically doesn't come in until sometime after October. But our dean's not always willing to float those kinds of things. So that can be a hindrance just to, people out in the population who want to get those endorsements and come back and be teachers. So I think that's something that really need to think about.
All right. Well, one thing that that happened this spring was that the governor has made a kind of stipulation, and Dr. Hollins, you probably can talk more to that. That licensed professionals have to be in the school per percentage per student, and that was huge because now school district really had to look how many licensed professionals they had and had to hire additional support. That was amazing. And so a lot of schools had to hire more school social workers, more behavior specialists who were licensed. So I just want to recommend BDOE and also the governor for doing that, because that certainly will help moving forward.
Yeah, a lot of these things just take a lot of time, and we're only on this committee for so long, so it's hard, we may not see everything through to its finality, but it is good to make sure we keep the pressure going on the needs of the state. All right, anyone have any more discussion on goals? All right, let's move forward on the agenda. We need to come up with our meeting schedule. I believe we already have our October and December meeting dates set. We are right now going to be in person in October. So yay. I'm excited about that, and I hope you are as well. Certainly things could change, but I do want to hear, the October dates are
7th and 8th.
7th and 8th, yes, and I believe it's December 2nd and 3rd.
Yes, 2nd and 3rd.
Okay. So before we talk about March and July of next year, I do want to talk about October. If anyone has any concerns about meeting in person, we can bring those to the attention of Hank and the BDOE support team, so they can work on those things for us. But please let me know if you have any concerns meeting in person in October.
What I can tell everybody is we are looking to expand the space, because if you all remember when we were meeting at the Hilton over there by the airport, when we got into that room, we were all pretty tight. So we are going to make sure that we can spread out and put at least 3 feet between each of us around the tables. We're also looking to ask them to provide a plated dinner for lunch with a choice that you'll make beforehand. And breakfast, we're still kind of trying to figure that out if we want to go with a buffet or just do something simple with, a fruit plate, wrapped biscuits, wrapped muffins, and so on. So we're still open for some thoughts and discussion on that, but we are certainly taking in consideration the COVID situation. As we had a brief conversation earlier, we are kind of moving forward out of it, but we don't want to perpetuate it by, bringing people in and making people sit too close together. So we are paying a very close eye on the safety precautions. We'll have plenty of hand sanitizer, wipes, all that stuff available. We're going to do bottled waters, bottled canned drinks. We will have coffee, tea, but we're going to try and limit contact in situations with our meeting in October. But if there's any other concerns you would like us to consider, or if you are totally opposed to meeting in person, I'd be glad to chat with you about that and make reasonable accommodations. And anything else that might be of concern related to that October meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hank. All right, so I'd like to propose March meeting dates of Wednesday, March 9th and Wednesday, March 10th as a full committee meeting, and Friday, March 11th as an executive committee meeting. We use that time to finalize the annual report that we've all spoken about the previous 2 days. That seemed to work really well this past year. That way we can have it ready to go to submit and present in June to the board. Is everyone okay with those dates? All right, and also just sticking with our regular schedule type, July 14th and 15th of 2022.
That was the 14th and 15th, Brian?
Correct, yes.
Brian, can I make a suggestion for the March meeting?
Yes, you may.
To hold the executive committee meeting on the Wednesday night before the Thursday, Friday meeting, and that gave the committee an opportunity to actually present their draft to the committee and have some review and discussion during the meeting sessions. We flipped it around this year specifically because of the situation with COVID and some other things going on. But I would recommend meeting the Wednesday night before an executive committee and presenting it to the full committee on Thursday, time for discussion, and then review on Thursday, and then come back Friday, hammer out any additional questions or concerns, and then move forward from there. And yeah, like every year, the committee is seen to say, you know, it's okay for the board to make some minor, or the executive committee to make some minor changes, but we concur that this is the meat potatoes of the report. That's just my thought and comment. Y'all can kick that around or keep it the way you want it. It's your committee. You do what you want, but
sure,
it seemed to work better when we had the executive committee meeting before we presented the report instead of at the end.
Okay.
That's just.
I agree.
You okay? Anyone else want to just have any discussion about that?
I like that idea.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful to have the meeting on Wednesday, really to file out all the issues and, you know, go through the reports and make sure that everything is in order, and then present that on Thursday.
Okay.
I liked the new, I liked this past year. It seemed to make putting that annual report together a lot simpler, to have the input from the committee members first, and then us meeting and as an executive committee cleaning it up. But that's just me.
All right, any other discussion? Well, I think we can go with meeting Wednesday night, but putting aside a good amount of time on Thursday for discussion of it to really nail it down, as well as Friday, maybe reduce some presentations. And I think we can get it taken care of in those 2 days and come out with a good product. So if everyone is in agreement with that, we'll move ahead with those dates. Unless we need to vote on it, Hank, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just ready to say you need to put that to a vote.
Okay. All right. So will someone motion for meeting March 9th, 10th, and 11th, and July 14th and 15th?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Who was second?
Mike.
Mike. Okay. All right. So please say aye or nay when I call your name. Danny.
Aye.
Dale-Anna.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Michael Garrison.
Aye.
Christine.
Aye.
Marguerite.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Pat.
Aye.
Robert.
Aye.
Mary Frances.
Aye.
Amanda.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Kelly.
Aye.
And Michael Willen.
Aye.
All right, motion passes for those meeting dates. Thank you all very much. All right.
Brian,
Yes.
I don't know what you have on your agenda for other business.
Mhm.
You know, we've had some people that have had to resign due to different reasons. One, Kendra Beltra now is working for the Virginia Department of Education, so obviously had to resign her position on the state Sseac, but she was also one of your members at large, so you're going to need to replace her member at large with another individual.
Okay.
Do we have a replacement for Kendra Belcher, Hank?
What was that, Marguerite?
Do we have a replacement for Kendra on this year?
Not yet. I've written to our board chair and asked that we put forward a call for nominations, not only for Kendra's position, but for two other vacancies, the two parent vacancies we still have.
Okay.
Have a vacancy now in Region 5 and Region 8. I think it's Region 5. So as soon as the call for nominations go out, then we'll do what we've always done, review those, and then identify potential candidates and put them forward to the board. Probably won't be on board until our October meeting, obviously.
Okay. Well, do we have any volunteers to become member at large?
I would nominate Dr. Castle.
Dr. Castle, do you accept that nomination?
Member at large to the, I mean, I'm a member now, right?
Yeah, but that would put you on the executive.
For the executive committee.
Yeah.
I can do that. Yes, certainly.
Okay. All right. So can I get a motion to nominate Dr. Castle?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All right. We'll go through.
Can I just
everyone
ask
to vote.
who moved and made the second on that?
Oh,
for the
sorry.
minutes?
Marguerite.
And the second?
Yeah, I made the second.
Marguerite.
Brian, you might want to check to make sure there are no other nominations to be put forward.
Okay, sure. Any other nomination?
Okay.
All right. And who made the motion?
I did. Michael Willen.
Okay, Michael. Thank you. All right. All right. We'll go ahead and vote on adding Dr. Castle to be member at large. Danny.
Aye.
Dale-Anna.
Aye.
Dr. Castle.
I'll abstain.
Ann.
Aye.
Michael Garrison.
I vote twice to cover Jeff. Yes.
Justin, oh, sorry, he's absent. Christine,
Aye.
Marguerite,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Pat, Pat, you there?
Oh, I didn't realize it muted.
It's okay. Robert,
Aye.
Mary Frances,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Kelly,
Aye.
Yeah, that will be fine.
Sandy, sorry, she's absent. Michael Willen.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. The motion passes. So welcome, Jeff, to member at large and the executive committee.
Thank you. I'm honored.
All right. So other than, I don't have anything else. I was wondering maybe, Christine, if you could give a little overview of how the presentation to the board went about the annual report. If you have something you'd like to say to the group about how it went and how they responded, if they had any questions.
Sure. It was, I guess, everybody's first in-person meeting, which was rather exciting to be around folks again and meeting face to face. But the report was well received. There were no comments, or I take that back. There were no questions about the report. They had a lot of what was within our report were some of the JLARC recommendations, and so they were well versed. They had been well versed and brought up to speed on that front. So very well received.
All right, that's good to hear. Thank you for that, and also thank you for going out there to present it to him with Jill. I did have a chance to watch it, so I thought it was great, and you guys did a fantastic job. So
thank you, sir.
And I certainly do encourage anyone on the committee to, if you have time, to watch the presentation from last June at the board meeting. If you get a chance, or definitely take some time to read the annual report, which can be found on the VDOE website under Sseac. That's all I had. Does anyone have any other business they'd like to discuss?
Did you want to set your dates through the end of the year? We've typically set the dates all the way to December.
Okay, I get you.
So continue like with October, December.
Sure. Okay. So October dates. October would be 6th and 7th. And December would be 1st and 2nd. Does anyone have any issues with those dates for October, December of 2022 for meetings? All right. Sorry, but we'll have to do this again. Can I get a motion for October 6th and 7th and December 1st and 2nd for meeting dates 2022?
Can I just jump in? I don't know if this is impacting October 22nd or October 5th of 2022 is Yom Kippur. So I don't know if that impacts anybody. Like, is that sunset to sun? It should, I'm guessing it's sunset the 5th to the sunset on the 6th.
Okay. Would anyone like to move those dates to the following week?
Yeah, I think that would be better because we have Columbus Day on the 10th, and that would mean we would be out for the whole weekend. So,
Okay.
13th.
So 13th and 14th?
Yeah.
All right. Can I get a motion for the 13th and 14th of October and December 1st and 2nd?
So moved. Michael
And a
Willen.
second?
I'll second it, it's Danny.
Oh.
Danny second, thank you. All right, we'll do this quick. Danny?
Aye.
Dealana?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Michael Garrison?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Marguerite?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Mary Frances?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Kelly?
Aye.
And Michael Willen.
Aye.
All right, motion passes for those future dates for meetings. Is there any other business we need to discuss before presentation?
Are you doing committee work, tasking folks to the subcommittees? Or is
Yeah,
that for tomorrow?
That's for tomorrow.
Okay.
Dr. Hollins, did you want to start a little bit earlier, or do you want to take a break? Do you need some time?
I'm perfectly happy to get started, Brian. I know that there's a break following my presentation, and I think many of the points that you guys brought up are actually items we're going to discuss, so maybe that'll give us a little bit of flex time for discussion before our break.
Okay, that sounds great. We'll hand it over to Dr. Hollins.
Dr.
All
Hollins,
right.
I've given you hosting capabilities so you can share your screen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hank. And I am going to transition to some slides just because I wanted twofold. One, to make sure I covered all of the areas that you guys have asked about and that we kind of have had on our radar to carry over for this year. But two, I also wanted to make sure I could provide this presentation to you as a source of information, particularly as you go back to your regions. So I am going to go ahead and switch out right now and go to my slides. And like I said, I will shoot you guys a copy of this after our meeting today as well. Great. All right. Well, hopefully I'm just looking for anybody to give me a thumbs up. Make sure you guys can see everything and hear me. Great. Thank you guys so much. And I'm sorry, I'm on dual monitor, so I promise I am looking at you. It's just on my other screen. I've got that awful summer cold that's going around that I think is a result of all of us being safe and germ-free for so long. So I have sequestered myself here in the corner of the 20th floor. There's no air conditioning, it feels like, and I've got a lot of technology. So bear with me on this little Friday. But oh, here, it would help if I would actually share the right presentation and not the one that's coming up after me. Here we go. Now we're cooking with gas. All right, so I'm going to share a little bit of an update with you from the agency this morning, and we are very cognizant that there is a lot going on, and I know we're going to take some time later on this morning to discuss the updates to the Virginia Alternate Assessment Program, and I'm really excited that I'm going to be doing a little bit of a follow-up with Mike after that. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of take a topic that we have a lot of concern about and a lot of questions, probably digging into that a little bit deeper. So I won't be covering that in quite as much detail as I typically would during my updates. But I did just want to roll through pretty quickly some things that are going on across the offices in special ed and student services. As I stated, many of these highlight some of the areas that you all have identified as priorities for the State Special Education Advisory Council moving forward. And I also want to make sure that I'm following back up with some of the federal and state priorities we've discussed over the last year as well. And so I do want to kind of put a cherry on top of the sundae and let you know where we are with some of our General Assembly legislation, particularly as that pertains to JLARC, because as we're kind of circling back around, there are a lot of pieces of legislation that have now carried forth those recommendations. And I know that they are of very high interest to the committee. And my goal is to provide you with this update and then to provide you with this presentation so that you can use it as an opportunity to update your own constituencies, maybe break it into smaller pieces to help folks kind of digest the information in any way that makes sense for your regions or for the folks that you work with. So hopefully I will have accomplished that goal by the end of our time today. I did just want to take a moment, for those of us in education, this is kind of the start of our new year after July 1, not only due to state fiscal policies, but often, as you can imagine, kind of that recalibration after the past school year and gearing up for the new school year. And so I always like to take a moment and just give some thought to what I think the priorities of our department in particular are, with a really special nod to kind of the work that we've undergone in the last year. Well aware that, as Brian eloquently stated, we can't solve a lot of the challenges that we have as a field in a year, but I think kind of recalibrating and making sure that we're identifying priorities so that we can be focused and really driven in our work is really helpful. And so I wanted to share with you what I feel that the priorities for the Department of Special Ed and Student Services are for the 21-22 school year. The first is school and program support. No more important now than after the course of the global pandemic, but making sure that first and foremost, we're providing technical assistance and supports to our school and programs. And I think the importance of that is that that's really our folks who are boots on the ground working with our kids day in and day out. And so how can we make sure that they have the resources, the information, the support, the information that they need to work with parents, the information that parents need to work with them in order to ensure that students are receiving a high quality education and appropriate supports. And so that is always a focus for us, is what are we doing every day to impact students around the Commonwealth. The second is looking at high leverage practices. And this is really just a fancy way of saying good practices for instruction and support for our students. We are no longer in a time where we can say we don't know what works for students with disabilities. We have great research-based, in-depth information about practices that work well with our kids in a variety of circumstances, whether it's academic, whether it's behavioral, whether it's social. We know what the best tools are to use. The goal is, how do we find what tool for what student, and how do we make sure it's being implemented appropriately and effectively? And so how are we making sure that our teachers and specialized instructional support personnel have the information, those tools in their tool bag to serve students at the highest level possible? The third is around teacher and leader effectiveness. And you'll notice this doesn't say special education teacher effectiveness. As Annie put so I think in such a great focused way, is that we all within the school system are working with our students. So how are we equipping our general education teachers, our special education teachers, our principals, our assistant principals, and making sure that when folks come out of their prep program and that every year during their professional development, they're equipped to meet the needs of truly every student that they're serving. A focus on transition. For me, this is something that's really close to home. I am very well aware that we only have our students for a brief window in time, from preschool to graduation, right? Whether that's at 18, 20, 21, or 22, it's relatively short time for us to have our kids and get them what they need. And so transition is always such an important focus, because how are we equipping them to live their life after school and be competitively employed, to living, in a community of their choice, to doing things that interest them, not only in their work, but also in their free time, and being supported by friends, family, and community members. A focus on literacy. You guys know that this has been a huge conversation that I speak with really frequently, particularly with our partners in the advocacy community. How are we ensuring that literacy is a focus for all students? And I think we are at such a great point within the research to know what the science of reading is telling us, and how that we can take this opportunity to update the work that we're doing around reading instruction really for all students. This is not a special education specific issue. Resources and technical assistance for students with intensive support needs. You all know that I came to this work working with students with autism as well as with significant intellectual disabilities. And so I am very cognizant that that remains to be a population that we struggle sometimes to serve appropriately, and particularly to focus on kids who have really intensive support needs. And how are we making sure that we're able to do that in an environment that is the least restrictive, but also the most appropriate for our students? And a lot of that involves partnerships with other stakeholders, such as our private schools, our residential facilities, our behavioral health colleagues. And then finally, recruitment and retention, because if any of us are paying attention to this item in special education in particular, we know that we are struggling to bring folks into the profession, and much more importantly, to be able to keep them in the profession. I spoke with a number of school divisions over the last couple of weeks as they work to round out their hiring process for the next school year. And I can tell you that it is disturbing the folks that I'm talking to that are experiencing shortages that never have before. And so this item and issue is something I know that you all have talked about, and we work really closely with our higher education colleagues on too, so definitely being a focus. So this feels like a lot, right? But I would charge you, what is anything that could come off this list? For me, there really is nothing. All of these need to be areas that we're focusing on for the upcoming year and working to support. And for some of these, it's continuing along a path that we've already designated. And for others, it might be changing course to something that we find is more effective to get us closer to our goals. I just want to run through really quickly some updates from across the offices, and I'm not going to read these slides to you. I really provided a lot of them as a point of information, but we do have some great opportunities coming up with our collaboration with the Office of Early Childhood. And I say that this is so important is that because you can see one of the impacts of the pandemic has been a change in the population of students that we are serving at the youngest ages. This graph denotes the number of students that we serve. It comes from our December 1 child count, which is that snapshot of data we do every year. And you can see for 2020, we had a marked decrease of students that we were serving within special education, early childhood special education. That's a decrease of over 2,500 students. We know that there was an increasing trend before 2020, right? Every year we identified more young children to work with in order to identify them, get them services and supports before they even entered kindergarten. The pandemic has had a huge impact on the early childhood education system. We see limiting factors for kids being involved in the public education system. We see a decrease in identification and eligibility counts for young children. And we know that for many of our parents and families, keeping these students and young children home was the best option for their family. And so now we really have to think creatively about how we're going to recoup this population, and most importantly, how we're going to recoup a year that maybe saw them without getting services and supports that they desperately needed in order to service them now, but also to make them more ready for when they enter kindergarten. We do have a lot of implications in this work, and I'm really excited to hear the department. We've added an Office of Early Childhood Education that has really grown out of a partnership with the governor's office, and we've actually brought over additional staff and departments from the Department of Social Services. And so now the focus on early childhood, from licensing to early childhood providers to early childhood education, is really going to all be housed under the Department of Education's roof. And I think that's incredibly important because it really shifts the focus to thinking about the provision of quality education, not just for K through 12, but really pre-K through 12. And we know the important role that many of our providers play in that scenario, but maybe haven't been recognized previously. And for many of the students that we're most concerned about, for some of our most vulnerable learners, those can be home education care providers. It could be neighborhood daycare. And so how are we really working with everyone out there who's impacting our students, our eventual students, our young children, to make sure that they're getting what they need? And so thinking about this, particularly in the context of some of the issues we experienced over the last year, and referral rates and identification, and thinking about the delayed children we have coming into kindergarten, delayed because they were held back for a year, maybe to make an opportunity for in-person instruction all the more available for them. So just a big implication that we continue to monitor, and I think a huge impact point for our school divisions in particular, and probably disproportionately because many of you probably have examples within your region of school divisions that had more of a face-to-face option earlier in the year, and maybe some of those didn't transition until later. And so thinking about the disparate outcomes it could have on some of our youngest learners is really one of our areas of focus. Here is just some indicator data that we have from Indicator 6, which looks at the number of young children that we're serving and making sure they have early childhood education programs. And so we see that similar drop here in the students. That's something that's happening across the country. It's not just in Virginia. And so I anticipate that our partnership with the Office of Early Childhood here will continue and definitely be making ourselves available some national resources and support to help address this issue in particular. As you can imagine, for our Office of Dispute Resolution, which handles many of our formal special education complaints, it's been a really busy year. One, making sure that technical assistance and support is rolling out to divisions as we're notified of information or as complaints are submitted. We definitely have seen an increased number of due process hearings, as well as a number of appeals. We do see some pretty consistent numbers in our state complaint and mediation, although this summer has been a little bit more busy with state complaints. I think that is a direct impact on navigating some of the work around providing compensatory services for students with disabilities as a result of the pandemic, particularly in the 2021 school year. We also are working with a national organization, the Center for Dispute Resolution, particularly with the focus of making sure that when we think about dispute resolution and addressing issues that parents and families have, we really are shifting a focus not just from the formal mechanisms of that, like due process, mediation, state complaints, but really thinking about how can we be more proactive in our approach and support for parents. So really being able to address issues before they get to the point of feeling like that's their only option to file a complaint. And so I know as part of the updates we'll provide to you, I really am excited for you to hear about some of the work we're doing around family engagement to really give a little bit of a shift to thinking proactively as opposed to reactively, and helping to install some policies and procedures here at the department so information can flow more seamlessly between offices. We have seen a continuance of some systemic issues, particularly in with impact around Andrew F. And then, as I mentioned, I think the biggest issue that we have seen is really interpretation as well as kind of working out of compensatory services, the provision of face-to-face instruction, particularly for some of our most significant needs students. And so we're going to continue to monitor these items, but then also cycle them back into how we're providing support and technical assistance to school divisions, knowing that these are kind of the hot topics for this year. How are we making sure that folks are aware of this? And a lot of that has been changed this year. What's been great is we've been able to have conversations. Dr. Lane has convened superintendents on bi-weekly or monthly calls, really as a result of his weekly calls during the pandemic. And it's been great to have a direct line to superintendents, and as always, to continue our work with special ed directors to make sure that they're keeping at the top of their mind the most important things to put into practice as they plan for programs, whether it was returning to school or thinking about this summer, how to use it effectively, and then really preparing for this upcoming school year. Our Office of Instructional Services has so many great opportunities that are rolling out, I think, that speak particularly to making sure that teachers and our administrators are well supported this year. And so I collected some of the most popular items here for your information. I do want to remind you, many of you are on our Gov Delivery for family engagement, which gives you kind of those bite-sized blurbs direct to your email box. But I really encourage you to sign up for our Special Ed Instructional Services update. It's a great resource that helps disseminate training opportunities as well as a focus on those high leverage practices. And so please feel free to sign up. I think it's a great resource for parents who kind of want to know what the latest and greatest in the quality instructional programming is. And I think it's a really great way to share with your school community members to make sure they're taking the time to take advantage of some of the free training opportunities and online opportunities that we have sponsored for the Virginia Department of Education. I mentioned here we have some great tuition-free inclusive practices courses as a result of our partnership with Radford. And so that's a really great way to make sure that folks are kind of learning what's new in the field. And then we are also kind of revamping our Special Education Directors Academy for the upcoming year. As I stated, recruitment and retention is an issue, but that's not only for special education directors. It's also, it's not only for special education teachers, it also impacts our special education directors. So making sure that we're sharing information with them and kind of giving them a crash course on the most important things they need to be thinking about during their first year is part of the technical assistance we offer. Also just wanted to recap some of the great activities that have taken place over the summer with a focus on serving students. We saw a lot of updated information around the sexual health and relationship education guidance. This is ongoing work that we're doing in partnership with James Madison University, as well as a specialized program support in partnership with Planned Parenthood. And it's a great activity that we have really helping IEPs to focus on areas that may not have been discussed before, but may impact our students specifically. We also spent a lot of time this year working with our network of board certified behavior analysts and making sure that folks around the Commonwealth are aware of the rich knowledge and support that professionals using applied behavior analysis can bring, particularly with a focus on BCBAs, BCABAs, and RBAs. And so we have some updated guidance that's now posted to help school divisions think through this process. And I was really heartened by so many folks that we talked with across the Commonwealth that are using BCBAs or BCABAs in a current in a current approach to working with students around behavior and really think creatively about how they support our teaching staff. So some really great work there coming out of instructional services, particularly from Daniel Irwin. We've, as always, look forward to the summer of having our I'm Determined Summit, which just wrapped up. We're also getting ready to start our MOVE Summit, which begins on Sunday, which is focused on young men, particularly our young Black men with disabilities and their families. And so it's just exciting for us to get opportunities to be with students again and to see the impact that our student leaders are having on the work that we do in this state. We also brought back our really popular co-teaching webinar series with Dr. Marilyn Friend and had that expanded to be able to offer as many spots as possible to teachers. The one silver lining, I think, sometimes for us, given the pandemic, has been the shift to virtual provision of professional development has allowed us to reach so many more folks than we previously have been able to in some of our in-person instruction. And so it's been great to see our co-teaching teams being supported and folks really getting in this work to help them plan and prepare for the next school year. We continue to bring back the content teaching academies this year with James Madison. And so that's been a really great partnership that we work here with our folks in teaching and innovation. So not only about the content, but also how to differentiate that content in a way that is really beneficial, quite frankly, to all learners, not just students with disabilities. Big focus on inclusive education, as I mentioned, and I mentioned the MOVE conference getting started on Sunday. And if you're not on Instagram or following us on Twitter, I hope you will consider joining because it'll be some great information that'll come out of that conference that will begin this week. In the Office of Student Services, sometimes I think that we don't take enough time, particularly during Sseac, to talk about this wing of our shop. And I think that's something I want to work with to really help support this year because, as Marguerite mentioned, some of the biggest impacts we've seen on our students have really been around school-based mental health and really thinking about the return to school and the impact that that has on their social, emotional well-being. And so we are really excited that we have been able to, over the course, really since I began here in 2019, we have secured 2 additional U.S. Department of Education grants alongside of this work with a focus on school-based mental health and the preparation of professionals working in this area. And so thinking about our school psychologists, our school social workers, and our school counselors. And over the last 2 years, we've brought in close to $10 million focused on these areas. And so we have some really great resources that are focused on ensuring that Virginia remains at the top tier of securing professionals to provide school-based mental health supports, but also making sure that we continually have conversations about our whole school community, getting the supports they need to have a focus on the well-being of our students so that they can learn and be in a position every day when they're in the classroom to be healthy and happy and engaged learners. We have some really great websites that we've done some updates to this summer. The first is that we have a new SEL page on our VDOE website. Many of you probably got the good news on July 4th that we published our social emotional learning standards as a result of General Assembly legislation. And we're excited to think about the impact that that will have across the Commonwealth. I say that many schools and divisions are already engaged in this work, and so we see this as really helping to catch up the entire state. How can we lay the structure and support of the standards over what's happening? And most importantly, how can we follow that up with training and support? In a couple of weeks, we'll be in a position to release the curriculum frameworks around social emotional learning. And so really, if you think about it, that gives a whole package for schools and divisions to really think about their approach to social emotional learning, and breaks that up information by grade and really ensures that it's developmentally appropriate for learners. We also have a new website, which I've linked here, is our School Mental Health Career and Learning Center, our CLC, and it is a great portal for our school-based mental health professionals, but I also think it's really interesting for anybody teaching and also for parents and families. There are some great modules that are kind of bite-sized nibbles on important topics, and really thinking about working through some of the most important situations we can deal with in the school. And you'll see here just some examples about diffusing disruptive behaviors, thinking about chronic absenteeism and what we can do to have an impact on getting students in school, helping our mental health professionals to kind of refine their toolkit to get a little update in their professional development. And then we continue to have a great partnership across the state with school-based mental health, and working with our university partners, particularly with the University of Virginia and school divisions. We're helping to pilot some innovative programs that, as a result of this grant support, we can then kind of back up and provide support and sustainability across the state. So a really big focus for us on school-based mental health, and also expanding the capacity throughout Virginia. And this work is all happening parallel with some of the updates we're seeing in Medicaid towards free care and behavioral health redesign. And so I'm looking at a lot of you who are working with rural school divisions, and we know that over the course of the pandemic, especially, schools have become kind of the center of a community. And for so often, that the school nurse might be a great place to receive information. That for the upcoming school year, COVID testing is going to be happening at more of our schools to ensure that students and staff are safe. So how can we kind of build upon this momentum and make sure that our schools are supported and resourced appropriately to meet the needs of their students, and really to help support their community as well? There are some additional great information sources that I've listed here around mental health and wellness. And if any of you are working in the field and want to kind of have something to jump off to maybe provide to folks, I really encourage you to check out our student services playlist on YouTube. There's some great training videos and information that can ensure that, one, you don't have to recreate the wheel, but it would be a great way to kind of kick off resource sharing with a group around a topic that maybe you've been discussing or concerned about. Just want to note here our focus on school nurses. As you can imagine, our school nurses and our school health professionals have been really inundated over the last year. And so thinking about how we're ensuring that they have support and resources effectively to make sure that they are not only prepared for the upcoming school year, but that we're also putting into place many of the things that have come through General Assembly legislation recently, particularly around the provision of stock albuterol inhalers, which is very similar to some previous work we've done around epinephrine previously, and then required seizure training that we have available online for school nurses as well. And so we continue to have a focus kind of on the whole student, and this physical health side is really important. We're also getting ready to release some updated guidance around required immunizations. Those required immunizations do not include the COVID vaccine, but we think it's really important given this time of year, as we've seen a decrease in the number of pediatric vaccinations, to remind folks that this is a great time of year to see your pediatrician, to see your dentist, to get everything caught up so you're ready for the new school year. We'll talk a little bit later about General Assembly legislation that's going to require school divisions to offer an in-person instruction component, and so we want to make sure that students and families are as prepared as possible and are entering school healthy and safe and ready to learn. We also anticipate having access to COVID testing, as I mentioned, but also to vaccinations for students as well as for communities. Our schools kind of served as hubs for that since we've been working with the Virginia Department of Health. And as I stated, we do see an increase in the availability of testing for the fall. If any of you guys have been, kind of paying attention to some of the health professionals as they kind of try and work out the repercussions of COVID, it does seem like it will transition for kind of this year-round focus to a more seasonal basis. And so making sure that schools are proactively prepared to deal with that seasonal implication and make sure that testing and vaccination is available. And we know that for some of our youngest students, vaccination isn't recommended yet. And so if and when that comes, being prepared, but then also being able to offer testing as a alternative is going to be really important. And the Virginia Department of Health has secured a large-scale grant from the Centers for Disease Control and is working to provide and partner with schools across the state to make sure that testing is available and really making it as easy as possible for schools to be able to offer that support to their community. I mentioned the work that we've been doing with our instructional services personnel, and school counselors are just one of the groups that we've had a big focus on. We really feel like this group needed kind of a refresh with some professional development opportunities that they had, really with getting away from this whole transition around guidance counselors who, maybe only think about scheduling and provide a very limited set of skills. We know that our school counselors are capable and have professional expertise to do so much more. So how are we kind of flipping the script on that? And most importantly, how are we equipping them to be members of a team to really speak to the need for school-based mental health and supporting students and staff through some of these really challenging times? And so you see here some of the supports that we've offered, and really excited to think about continuing that support over the next year. Today was actually the kickoff for our school-based mental health summit. As I mentioned, our shift has been to virtual training since the pandemic. That used to be a really big in-person event, but now we are going to kind of break it up quarterly over the year and be able to offer that virtually. And we think that's something that's much more user-friendly for our school counselors, but also encourages us to have a topic that's more meaningful for every quarter. And so really excited to hear how that's going today as well. I wanted to mention that we do have some new guidance that is kind of out on the streets. I mentioned social emotional learning, but just wanted to refresh your memory that we also published the model policies for the treatment of transgender students per General Assembly legislation. As a result of that, we've collected a number of amazing resources on our website, on our gender diversity webpage that I've linked here for you, not only the model policies, but also some great examples of how to tackle some questions from a division's perspective. How do I go about data collection? How can I communicate with students and families? How can I support my teachers and administrators? Some really great resources here for supporting folks and implementing whatever their local policy looks like, as well as obviously providing the example of the model policies as the General Assembly required us to do. We've also had a big focus on specialized instructional support personnel, and I know Marguerite mentioned the ratios, particularly around school counseling that have happened as a result of really relentless support from the Virginia Board of Education. And I know that that conversation is going to continue, as well as how to be as flexible as possible with staffing for these individuals. We've seen a huge influx in requests for pandemic relief funding to be used for school-based mental health from our schools and divisions. And so I think it'll be interesting to see over the next year or two how that funding is utilized and how that approach may change moving forward based on the supports and services that are able to be provided by these individuals in the school setting. We're also working with a lot of our partners, particularly with the Virginia Department of Social Services, on a number of initiatives, not only in partnership with the Commission on Youth, but there's been an amazing focus on homeless youth and children, as well as foster care youth, and really thinking about the unique implications the pandemic has had on them, and really how to support them moving forward. And so this is an area that I think is really exciting. And you guys have Pat here, who is our go-to expert on the topic. So I know that she'll be happy to bring you updates, particularly as we see the rollout of some of the federal pandemic relief funding. And we just really value the support that we get from both her and Aaron, our colleagues at VDSS. It's been a really busy year, as it always is for these students, but I think more so than ever, we want to make sure to maintain a focus on some of our most vulnerable youth and children moving forward. You all know that you get an update from the Office of Program Improvement, particularly around where Virginia kind of falls in the rest of the states around the country. And I'm really excited to say that in partnership with the U.S. Department of Education, we're really working to update and revamp our monitoring protocol, not only as a result of technical assistance from the U.S. Department of Education, but as a result of JLARC as well. I think we really came away from that report thinking about how can we create more of a verification and validation piece to the data that we receive from school divisions, and how are we kind of taking all of the movements over the last 10 years and updating our approach to monitoring special education programs. And so it's always been a little bit of a balancing act for us in that, but I'm really excited that we'll roll out our first cohort year this year with our new monitoring protocol. And it will be great to give you an update on what that looks like moving forward, as well as kind of talk about some of the lessons learned. We continue to work with the Office of School Quality with some of our more in-depth school divisions that we have a memorandum of understanding with. And we continue to focus on the support we receive through the Virginia IEP system. We're starting a new cohort this year and are really excited to think about the majority of school divisions within the state will be under Virginia IEP. And that just makes everything so much easier for monitoring and is less of an imposition on school divisions, but also gives us some really great, rich data to support what we're seeing as far as student performance and outcomes. Along with that balanced approach from that kind of compliance standpoint of verification and validation, I think there's a really strong sense of results-driven accountability. And you all know that this was a focus back when I was in special ed program improvement. You know, what are we really saying that's important to us? And at the time, we stated that, well, what's important to us is graduation for students with disabilities. And so how are we making sure that the largest population possible are leaving us with a standard diploma or an advanced studies diploma? And so through work around flexibilities from credit accommodations, through focus of technical assistance, through working with divisions hand in hand, I think you can see the payoff and the results of that work. The yellow line was our target that we developed for the state systemic improvement plan over the last 8 years. And I think you can agree with me that this has been one of the most successful initiatives we've had at the department to date. Seeing the increase that we've had in students with some of our most significant disabilities being able to graduate with a standard or advanced studies diploma, I think is the epitome of showing that high expectations yield results for our kids. And we've been really excited to see what a couple of things put into place and kind of a shift of mindset can really do to ensure that students are leaving us with whatever they need to get to that next step for them, whether it's higher education, 2-4-year university, community college, whether it's vocational training, or whether it's directly into the world of competitive work. And we have really seen a great shift in focus for that. And I think that sometimes those little options for flexibility, whether it be credit accommodations or some of the waiver and relief measures we've seen as a result of COVID, we really are going to evaluate and see, hey, from all the things that we've done and from all the things that we've learned, is there an opportunity to keep some of these things in place long term to ensure that we're providing flexibility, but also a focus on rigor for our students across the state? I mentioned Virginia IEP, and I love showing this map. The green is just taking over the whole state, and you can see with this year's cohort 5, we really have worked to address a lot of the needs from school divisions. And so each time you see one of these school divisions colored in, keep in mind that that means that the state is supporting their IEP system. And so that is more resources freed up for students with disabilities within the community. And most importantly, something I think we heard so clearly from the onset of this project is that this is such a useful resource and tool for some of our smallest and rural divisions. Their ability to secure a large-scale contract for a system that really met their needs may have been limited. And so enabling us to support them to do that has ensured that we are giving them the tools to not only be compliant, but to make sure that they are working with student-level data and information in a way that can allow them to train and offer technical assistance to their professionals. So really excited about this, particularly as we wind down the final stages of this project. And so I mentioned this balancing piece. I think as we transition into the 21-22 school year, I want you to kind of keep this idea of enhanced federal program monitoring on your radar. It's going to be our goal to kind of balance both of these approaches, both that we've seen kind of be priorities over the last decade, and really say, okay, based on the lessons learned, how are we creating a monitoring system that accomplishes both of these tasks, but is also individualized to Virginia? And for us, what's really important is making sure that the outcomes of our students are as positive and successful as possible. And so I really look forward to having more conversations with you and bringing you back information to share on this approach to monitoring that we're going to start this year. I mentioned some really exciting updates in the Office of Facilities and Family Engagement, and you guys were once again introduced to Tracy and had the opportunity to meet Chiquita today. And I think this is something that I really feel passionate about. You guys know that family engagement is an area that's very near and dear to my heart, not only here at the state level, but I have firsthand seen the value of a rich family engagement outreach effort at a local school division. And so thinking about how we once again shift from kind of that reactive to proactive approach has been really important for us. And I have so valued Hank and Tracy's leadership in particular, and thinking about how we approach this and really kind of giving us a little bit of a revamp and a rebrand around family engagement and making sure that we're equipping the state to have capacity. And I think one of the things that you guys brought up is so important is the Sseac training. And we have heard from a number of years, not only from all of you on state Sseac, but as we've traveled around the state, from our local partners, as well as from parents and families, we've heard about the capacity and the existence, the support that school divisions are getting from their Special Education Advisory Committee. And so I will share with you that I think if us traveling around training on Sseac helped, we wouldn't have this problem, right? So we need to take a little bit of a different approach. And so I hope you're going to be excited to hear about some of the outreach efforts we've made, but also some of the steps we're taking in partnership with some stakeholders like Virginia Commonwealth University Center for Family Involvement and PTC to make sure that we're strengthening this approach, but two, we're able to cover more places, right? And be more efficient and effective with our time and making sure that we can truly reach those corners of the state that maybe don't have that support. And so hopefully with some of these resources in your tool bag, it will allow you to support your regions and make sure that they have information and resources that they can go to around local Sseacs. We've had a lot of updates to our Office of the Parent Ombudsman. Gloria Dalton continues to be such a stalwart in that work, and I think really do a great job here recently of collecting some really in-depth data around the needs and the trends that we're seeing in the state. And so that information is really helpful as it comes into us here and is a tool that I use in conversations with Dr. Lane about the priorities for family engagement, particularly with a focus on students with disabilities in the state. I just wanted to list out a couple of training and opportunities here because I think these are really important and could offer up as kind of resources for you to share, not only some of our information like our one-pager for the Parent Ombudsman, but also breaking down the Applied Studies Diploma and making sure that families have access to accessible information around that option for their students. We've done a lot around building off of the support from our Virginia Board for People with Disabilities grant around critical decision points and ensuring that we are growing and continuing to grow that training, whether it's in person or much more of a focus online as well. And so I know that Tracy is anxious to share some of those opportunities through. And we're also working to really infiltrate family engagement in all of our initiatives. And so, you know, as we think about things like social emotional learning, as we think about supporting transgender students, how are we ensuring that there is a thread of family engagement in all of our areas? And one example is that Tracy and her folks are working on partnering with our colleagues in student services to produce a video on engaging families through the post-pandemic return to the classroom. They've authored some components of the social emotional learning framework as well. And so it's much more of an idea, instead of family engagement being over here like just as family engagement, how does family engagement factor into the conversations we have at the department around our priorities? And how are we making sure that as we bring teachers and administrators along in that conversation, how are we making that information available, accessible, and digestible for families and parents too, so that we're all moving forward together in our understanding that we can then use to the benefit of our students. Something that's a little bit less, you know, fun to talk about family engagement is finance and budget, but albeit just so important, right? Because how can we support some of our initiatives if we don't make sure that we maintain accountability around the funds that we receive? So many of you know that here in Virginia, the majority of the funding to support our initiatives comes from the federal IDEA grant. This related to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Still not fully funded, but you know, we will take what we can get at this point. The majority of those funds go directly to school divisions to support staffing positions and programs around students with disabilities. However, the state does set aside an amount to fulfill administrative monitoring obligations that the feds require us to do, right? So you think about dispute resolution, you think about monitoring. We spend a lot on family engagement. That is not required, but that is one of our priority areas. So you can imagine a lot of the partnerships that we do with PC when Tammy and Suzanne come to share with us about Transition University and all of the courses and components we offer. Those are things that we support through the grant. As part of that work, though, we also need to make sure that school divisions are spending money appropriately and that we're helping them to kind of figure that out. As you can imagine, not many of us in special ed have an accounting or fiscal background. And so I really think we've been remiss in not making sure that our SPED folks have those kind of skills and resources at their fingertips to ensure that they are utilizing their funds to the greatest maximum benefit of students, but also that they're accountable for those funds, right, and how they're used. And we want to see them used in a way to directly benefit students. So we've done a lot of work over the last year under the amazing expertise of our director, Tracy Coleman, to really help bring us up to speed with finance and budget, as well as to bring that in line with some of our monitoring protocol as well. So when we're in the division, not only asking about programs and IEPs, we're also seeing what their SPED budget looks like and what kind of things they're supporting through that. Many of you might be familiar with our regional tuition reimbursement program or regional programs that are a result of a partnership among school divisions in your area. And this, as a result of collaboration with the General Assembly, has really kind of revamped itself into something that's less specific to just certain regions and more of an equitable allocation across the state. And so the Regional Tuition Reimbursement Program was designed as a way to utilize funding to support students with really intensive needs. The thought being, hey, the school wants to support this student and wants to keep them in the school division, but they have a lot of needs, maybe around behavior, maybe around socialization support, maybe academically. And the regular kind of model doesn't account for that. So instead, the state found a way to say, okay, we're going to tag these kids as high need, and so we're going to fund them a little bit differently so that we give divisions some flexibility and some additional funds to support that work. And what we've seen over the last number of decades is that this funding has really gone to regional programs that have kind of a strength in that one area of the state. The General Assembly noticed this and noticed the amount and said, hey, we really want you guys to look into a more equitable approach to do this. How can we take these funds and kind of redistribute them in a way that reflects the need? And so we've spent really the last 10 years digging into data, working with the General Assembly, working with local school divisions, working with our regional providers to find this balance between learning the best from the previous model and then also inputting some things that bring it more up to date so that even our smaller divisions can take advantage of the support, because we know even if you're a small division, you have students that fit under this umbrella. Just like if you're a big division, you have more students that fit under this umbrella. And so it's been great working with our folks in finance and budget to really determine how we have revamped the program, made it more accessible, made it more equitable, and I think it's going to serve as a platform for some of our future work around making sure we're serving students with the most intensive support needs appropriately. We have just now gotten our new allocation from IDEA that actually includes additional funding through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP. And so this fiscal year on the Fed fiscal side, which starts October 1, school divisions will receive not only their usual IDEA allocation, they'll also get an additional piece of funding through ARP. And so all of that money, unlike the IDEA money, flows directly to school divisions. There is no state set-aside component to that. So I say that, but I think it's a really important consideration to begin the conversation in the next school year from the Sseac perspective, and say to your division, let's talk about the ARP funds that we've received, in addition to the ESSER funds previously received for special ed. What is our division doing to utilize those funds? What has been our approach to ensuring that those funds and resources are being directed in a way that we see our community needs them to, particularly for our students and how they may have been impacted by an instructional modality, a return to the school environment physically, All of those, I think, are really important considerations for our local Sseacs to kind of know and be aware of so that they can participate in those conversations robustly with their school divisions. This is just some great information around the initial CARES Act funding that I mentioned. Obviously, ARP with IDEA is kind of like the third installment, but we've also had ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, which are the two initial pandemic relief funds. And as part of ESSER 1 funding, we actually received some really dedicated funding streams out of that. One was ESSER school-based mental health. And so we have school divisions that through a grant process, school-based mental health and student services, which are the top one and the bottom one, those are both application-based. And so school divisions kind of say, hey, we want more money to dedicate to our student services positions or to our school-based mental health. And so they wrote up an application in the budget. They submitted it to us. The department approved it and is now monitoring their implementation of that. The middle piece, that ESSER SPED piece, is actually directly sent to divisions based off their December 1 child count. So think about it as like a SPED booster funding. So I mentioned that would be another area of funding that we know school divisions have received. And so a conversation would be around the ARP and ESSER 1 funds. You know, how do we utilize those for students with disabilities? And so I think that's something to have on your radar and just kind of be aware of how we've played out. I do think there's going to be more funding pending General Assembly action during the special session that's coming up around school-based mental health. And so we're hoping that we still may have some additional cards to play to support school divisions and implementation of that using some of that ARP funding. And I'm so sorry, these acronyms are ridiculous, but like the ESSER and ARP funds are all the pandemic relief that flowed down to states from the federal government, both under the Trump administration and then under the Biden administration. I'm happy to kind of parse that out for you guys. I know I'm going fast. So I want to jump into some federal and state priorities. I mentioned our partnership with the U.S. Department of Education, particularly around monitoring. And what has been happening at the federal level is that they are also rolling out a new approach to monitoring. And it's been a little start and stop, obviously, given the pandemic. For a while there, it was like nothing was stopping and we were just going to ignore the pandemic and roll on with our monitoring. But US Ed has decided now to pause that, to really be responsive and reflective to the needs that states have around pandemic impact. And so we anticipate that conversation will probably start back up soon. And I think that will continue to be part of the update we bring you as a result of our monitoring redesign. We know that they have now shifted to monitoring COVID-19, and so I've had a lot of conversations with them about the supports and resources we make available on our website. Some of the concerns that they're hearing from other states, you know, about the provision of things like summer support through extended school year and summer school, and also preparing for the 21-22 school year. We also had an in-person visit from US Ed back in May of 2019. And as a result of that, we have made some updates, one of which has been to the language in our regulations around independent educational evaluation. And so you guys will see that coming to the board this fall to really be fast-tracked through the regulatory process. That's a process that exists to kind of update regulations as a result of legislation. And one of the bills that passed this year was around altering the language around individualized education, independent educational evaluations. I talked a little bit about our priorities from the special ed and student services side, but we also have priorities from our state superintendent. And Dr. Lane has had really a laser focus on preparing and providing technical assistance to school divisions to ensure high quality service throughout the pandemic, and particularly in helping school divisions to rebound from that. And so we continue to see a focus on the impact of COVID-19. He has really been instrumental in ensuring that there are flexibility and waivers for local school divisions as a result of that, and then thinking about how we can continue that flexibility as appropriate, particularly around accountability. You know, you can imagine that this has had a huge impact on the testing information that we have from school divisions, as well as conversations about how that impacts their overall accountability. We've also been working on developing high quality instructional materials. As you all know, the Department of Education provides the standards of learning, SOLs, as well as the curriculum frameworks, which kind of take the SOLs and kind of expand them into the needed areas that are required for essential understanding of many of those skills and areas. But part of that is also then impairing that with a high quality instructional curriculum. We do not have a state endorsed curriculum in Virginia. And so really helping school divisions to think, how do we approach curriculum development? There was a time back when I was teaching when school divisions wrote their own curriculum. Now we're kind of gravitating to much more of the provision of provider curriculum or packages. And so really helping school divisions to think through that process. I mentioned too that the Virginia Board of Education is going to continue to focus on the standards of quality. What that means for us is that they will be taking up special ed staffing as a result of this. And so I think it'll be a really great way to keep you in tandem with you advising the board with this work moving forward. And so I think the first touch we'll have on that is kind of an introductory information in September. So I'm excited that during our fall meeting, I'll be able to give you a robust update on that process with the board, but also maybe replicate some of that information so that you're kind of developing your own understanding and thoughts and feedback and perspectives alongside the board members as well. I mentioned the Senate Bill 1303, and that is the requirement of in-person instruction for school divisions in Virginia. So what this means is that come this fall, unless there is another, kind of superseding act or shutdown, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think any of us think is going to happen, right? The school divisions must offer an in-person instructional opportunity, an option. School divisions can also choose to offer a virtual option if they so choose, but the good news is that there's been a really clear focus on the provision of an in-person option for instruction. But also, I think a lot of school divisions are going to be flexible in what they offer, because we know that for a lot of our families and parents and students, virtual might be the best choice for them or might be the right choice at this moment. I also want to mention some budget language that passed around an extension of services for students with disabilities. This has been something that we've provided a lot of information to localities with, but I really hope that you all will help us to disseminate this information. There was a piece of legislation in the General Assembly, House Bill 2277, that actually did not pass, but the language in the budget was included. And so it set aside $6.5 million of pandemic funding from the state to help support students for an additional year of special education services. And this was directed at our students who are pursuing an applied studies diploma, because there is an age qualification that really was going to our students who are 21 and 22. And so really thinking about over the last year, as a result of maybe limited in-person instruction, thinking about how we could use this additional year to help them recoup any services or skills or supports. I will say a lot of it has focused around transition-related supports, because as you can imagine, students weren't able to get out into job settings. They weren't able to do some vocational training that maybe they had identified in their IEP. And so this funding is available for school-based teams to look at and say, okay, Sam is getting ready to age out of special education, but maybe over the year I didn't get my vocational training. And so how are we going to think about approaching it with her this year? Is she going to come back on a part-time basis to do this? Are we going to contract with a provider? Is she going to go to a private school? Maybe the private school she's already attending to get these services and supports. And so there's a pot of money there that is an option for local school divisions should they so choose. And it's an option because local school divisions are required to compensate for the local match of that piece. So there's kind of a three-part funding. There's federal, state, local. The money covers the federal and state side, but they are asking divisions to kind of opt into this. And so we continue to work with that as getting a lot of calls, both from professionals and parents alike, and make sure they understand what the options are available and how best to utilize that funding and support. I mentioned that a lot of summer learning opportunities have been happening. I know we've also been addressing some issues around shortages of personnel to staff some of those summer learning opportunities. And I think that's been a huge concern, particularly for some of our largest divisions as well. And so we've seen that kind of impact scheduling and availability of services and kind of how they typically roll out. We're also approaching, folks to be prepared for the 21-22 school year and making sure that they are thinking about how to plan instruction and academic support for students because quite frankly, there has not been a student who hasn't been impacted by the pandemic. So how are we kind of using that to recalibrate our approach to instructional planning and support? And then continuing to monitor the long-term impacts of the pandemic. Because you can imagine, it's not only about things like early identification for students with disabilities, it's also about the provision of services and supports. And so we're monitoring that internally, but also working with external partners on some research studies to make sure that we are on top of how this has impacted our students and our schools and how we can continue to support both of them effectively. I mentioned the COVID relief funding, and so now you see kind of the breakdown of that ESSER 1 funding for SPED, student services, and school-based mental health. And I'll talk briefly about the American Rescue Plan Act funding, some of which we already know about, and I think more updates to come with that for sure. I did want to circle back around on a topic I know that has been one of the priorities for the council, and that is restraint and seclusion. A reminder that the regulations governing seclusion and restraint in public elementary and secondary schools went into effect January 1. We have also worked to provide school divisions with training grants as a result of state funds to support the implementation of those regulations. We anticipate that there might be an additional year of award of those funds as well. As you can imagine, some of the training efforts might have been stymied over the last year due to the pandemic, and so we want to make sure that folks have this on their radar and they're training their school division staff to be in compliance, but also to ensure the safety of their students. It's been a really busy General Assembly session over the last year, and as I mentioned, they do start their special session in the next couple of weeks. I did just want to capture in one place some of the biggest pieces of legislation that happened during 2021. A lot of work around private schools and our partnership with the Office of Children's Services here. And so a reminder on the memos that we've posted thus far about requiring private schools to have a license from the Virginia Department of Education in order to receive funding to support student placements through the Office of Children's Services, the requirement for private school accreditation through an external body, as well as some flexibility around the use of CSA funds to support students transitioning to perhaps a lesser restrictive environment. And so I think a lot of momentum here around our partnership with Office of Children's Services to say, what's the next step for thinking about how we creatively and appropriately serve students with the most intensive needs. I mentioned school health around the utilization of stock albuterol inhalers and the role of school nurses. I talked briefly about behavioral health redesign and Medicaid and how that can impact our work around school-based mental health. We also have an update to ensure more transparent information sharing with court-appointed special advocates or CASA volunteers. And so there'll be a SPED memo that comes out about that. This was also the session for work groups and studies. We have a lot of work groups and studies that we are either participating on or leading at the department over the next year. And these are just some of the items that those work groups will undergo. I did want to highlight one in particular, and that is that the Secretaries of Health and Human Services, along with Education, are going to be working on the question of transferring the support of private special education schools to the Virginia Department of Education. And so that work group, I know we have some representatives that are on that group here with us today, but I think that's a really important topic to make sure that we ensure you guys are keeping up to speed on and really thinking about the impact that that would have, not only on us as an agency, but also on the work that you do with thinking about the approach that would bring in kind of a higher level of partnership with our private school providers. I mentioned JLARC, and many of the recommendations that were in JLARC have now transitioned into legislative requirements, particularly around updating eligibility and IEP guidance for the department, talking about an update to our monitoring protocol, having more robust opportunities for investigations of non-compliance with school divisions, some more transparent information around the state complaint process and the timelines associated with that. And then a really big focus on training and licensure. So, you know, to Annie's point, there is definitely a focus with everyone should be prepared to provide specialized instruction and work with students with disabilities. So how are we incorporating those requirements into preparation programs for general education teachers, as well as our administrators? And similar to the dyslexia module that you all oversaw a few years ago, the development of that, we will also be creating a module around the role of members of the IEP team and IEP team training that will be available to and required for school-based personnel. But we are also working on kind of a family and parent component of that we think will be really useful to help folks understand that process that I think can be really intimidating and not transparent all the time. So how can we help parents to further their understanding and education around IEP teams and hopefully feel a lot more comfortable about engaging in those conversations and knowing what to expect. So I'm going to pause there. Hopefully you guys all have my contact information. You can always reach out to me at any time. You don't have to wait for us to be together during these meetings. But as I told Brian, I was grateful for the flexibility in time. I know we're about 15 minutes away from a break, and I wanted to stop briefly and see if there are any questions. I'm also going to look back in through chat because I couldn't see it when I was presenting, and I'm happy to have folks unmute or drop anything in chat. Everything from a question to a clarification to, hey, Sam, you didn't mention this. I think it'd be great for us to hear more about that, or an amen on a particular item that you feel really resonates with you and the priority you have for the upcoming school year. So with that, I will pause. Brian, I'm happy to take questions or do whatever I can to facilitate you guys.
Sure. Yeah, if anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute and ask away.
I just had a quick comment. Sam, that was just very comprehensive, a lot to digest, but really gave us a nice, I think, some good parameters to really think for this year as well and pursue our priorities. But thank you for that. It was pretty amazing.
Thanks so much, Michael. I know it's a lot of information. I feel like I just, threw it all at you guys. But like I said, the slides, please take those and use them for your notes, but also for updates too. And I'm happy if maybe I hit on a topic that you're talking about or you're interested in, and maybe I didn't go into enough depth. I'm happy to provide anything additional to that as well. Make sure you guys have these slides. I see a couple of comments in the chat. Anne mentioned how she attended the JMU Special Education Content Teaching Academy. So I'm glad to hear that you thought that was a great experience, Annie. I think those are something we bring back every year and are always really well attended and create a really great PD opportunity for teachers. So would love to hear any additional feedback you have on that in particular. Erin mentioned that she was really impressed with the model policies for treatment of transgender students, and I appreciate that. We've really worked to not only be responsive to the legislative requirement, but to make sure we're robustly providing resources around that. And I know it's been a really hot topic and conversation in the media as well. And so I really just encourage you guys to take a look just so you kind of know what's there. And we're happy to answer any questions about the role that we play in the department for that. One point of clarification is that school divisions will be adopting their own version of that. They can use our model policies as that version, and they can create something else. But that is a requirement from the General Assembly. I just want to be clear that the ability that we have to kind of police that is limited given our role, but that was very clearly laid out in legislation. So thanks to Diac weighing in about that. I do think it's been a great opportunity to advocate for some of our most vulnerable students in a way that helps people to understand, educate themselves. And can I just say too, it was such a pleasure to work with that group. We had a lot of student voices and leaders on our development group for those model policies. And if you haven't been around our kids lately, they really are amazing, and just so grateful that we have them as partners. Yeah, Mike.
Hey, Sam. I just wanted to thank you for sharing the information about recruiting retention. That's like probably my number one thing. How can we get more special education personnel, period, and how can we retain them? And I'm just glad to see the continued emphasis on it. It's my passion project for us, because without the teachers, without the personnel in the special education department, we can't implement anything. And so thank you for leading on that.
I appreciate that, Mike. And I think it's such a focus for us as well. I have, I think this has always been a focus for us, but the thing that excites me is now it's a focus for our entire agency. And so Dr. Lane has been really unequivocal in his support of thinking about how can we be more involved in this process and how can we incentivize the process? How can we work with higher ed instead of like just saying this is a higher ed issue, because it's not, right? It's us, it's our local school divisions, it's higher ed as well. And so I'm excited. I think one thing that we really want to think about, we brought on a new assistant superintendent for human capital and talent management. Dr. Rosa Atkins might be a name that many of you are familiar with. she would be so embarrassed, but award-winning superintendent out of Charlottesville City. And Dr. Atkins is just amazing. She's provided us with support for our aspiring leaders in special education, and to have her voice and expertise around this topic, and to be able to, for me to partner and collaborate with her as well as with our folks in teacher ed and licensure, I'm really excited to see what we'll bring to the table. And so I hope there's an opportunity for maybe Dr. Atkins to join us and to give us an update on this, and to get some feedback from you guys as well, because I know this is a topic that's near and dear to many of our hearts, but it's also been a huge priority of this group. And I think advising the board based upon the next year of work would be a great way to approach, our annual report to them. So thanks, Mike. Appreciate that feedback and totally agree with you.
Dr. Hollins, I just wanted to quickly commend you all for one of the websites that you shared during your slides was the Virginia Career and Learning Center for School Mental Health Professionals. Oh my goodness, if you're looking for a job in the field of mental health, what you have there, that is fantastic. I mean, if it lists the school divisions that are looking to recruit, the positions that they're looking to fill. Are all of the school divisions across the state aware of this as a resource?
Well, thank you, Christine. We really appreciate that. That is one of the products that has come as a result of our grant funding. And I dropped the link in the chat, but this website is awesome, and no shade intended for the VDOE website, but those federal dollars can really be used to do some innovative things. But yes, Christine, I think that's something that we're really working on ensuring. Obviously, we have a group of school divisions we're working with directly as a result of this grant, but we have sent this information out to every single superintendent and school division, as well as special education directors in the Commonwealth. But I really hope that folks are becoming aware of this and are asking their school divisions, hey, do we have vacancies that should be on here? Here are some great candidates who are coming to work in Virginia. And so I agree with you. I think it's a huge area for us. And if you guys haven't been able to tell, like in special ed and student services, which is, my department, right? That's kind of like everything under us. It is really sometimes has been parsed out to like, here's the special ed side and here's the student services side. I mean, I am just like shoving those two things together because in case you haven't noticed, right? Everything that we do well for marginalized and vulnerable student populations. You're struggling to teach a kid how to read, we can help. You're struggling to have a kid with the behavioral supports appropriate, we can help. You have a kid who's dealing with trauma and mental health issues as a result of, things that have happened in life and not being engaged, we can help. So it's really about taking all of our resources and support and around putting them behind working with every student that may come to the table with an area or a challenge. And I will speak from my own experience. I don't think, particularly after what we've gone through the last 18 months, there's a kid out there that's not coming to the table with something that they're dealing with. So my role is, hey, let us help you. We're good at helping and supporting all students with a focus on all. And so our department is really mobilizing to say it's not just about special ed, it's not just about student services, it's about serving all students. And we have the tools and the support to do that. And so circle back around, Christine, we're actually reaching out now directly to everybody in the state who's working with our kids, whether you're a special ed director that oversees that group, whether you're in a big division like Fairfax and you've got SPED over here and student services here. We're really disseminating all of this information directly to them because we think that they should be aware of all of it in order to provide an appropriate and sustainable portfolio of services to meet the needs of their students. So yes, we are hopeful. I saw Pat just dropped in that she's been sharing the sites with folks, and please do not hesitate to shout this from the rooftops. We are pushing this out on social media. We are engaging in Twitter in a way that we never have before because we're cognizant that parents and families are on there and those bite-sized pieces of information are easily more digestible for them. And so, not something that we're always super comfortable with here, but we are just pushing those boundaries. And so I hope you'll join us on SDSS Twitter as well to hear about some of those opportunities. But yes, we hope so. And if you hear of anybody that doesn't know, please let me know and we will get with them as soon as possible. Yes, I will drop my email address in the chat, and I will also drop the social media stuff I mentioned as well. Thank you, Kelly, for reminding me.
Thanks, Sam, for that great presentation. This is Claire Huerta. We've just heard some confusion about the additional funding for kids who have aged out of their IEPs. And I wondered if Department of Education was going to do a Q&A or any like resource documents that might help local school districts understand better, as well as families.
Yeah, Claire, thanks so much. Now, I'm bringing up the superintendent's memo too. You know, we've also encountered a little bit of confusion around that. And I think, quite frankly, it was a lot goes into this when we kind of get something from the General Assembly that didn't go through the usual process. And so, yes, and a short answer is yes, we are preparing some additional technical assistance information. We also have yet to release the application for school divisions to utilize. We really wanted them to take their time and focus on identifying students and working through the process. But you are right, we've had a lot of concern. That's why I wanted to bring up the memo so I could link it for you guys, but also hopefully in some of the conversations we've had, I've walked through some of the examples, right? And so the way that the bill was worded initially, it was really around extension of eligibility, right? And so that you think about, well, what does that mean for a student, particularly, here we go. And I'm gonna share my screen real quick. And somebody just took away my screen sharing. Hank, you put me on a short leash. Can you give me screen sharing back? I know he's taking his life in his hands. But, as I get that back, so yeah, this superintendent's memo, what it did is it kind of went through the process, and so hopefully you guys can see it here. I'll make it bigger. And so there really are only two requirements for this, for kids to be eligible for this, right? The first is that they're receiving special education services. So one, they have an IEP. The second is how old they are, the birth date that they have. And so let me just bring up this criteria. We actually took the time to develop a couple of resources for this in particular, just to make sure that we could help folks walk through the process. Share my right screen. And so this document is kind of our approach to that. And so here you see all the background about the fact that this is state funding to support what usually is provided through IDEA, right? And so this money kind of takes the place of state and federal IDEA money that divisions get for kids with disabilities. The required qualifications, this is what you need in order to be able to take advantage of this option. One, this is an option for local school divisions. They have to opt in and decide to do this, right? Our thought being that, of course, this is an option. There's a huge amount of pandemic relief funding here, but school divisions also have a lot of pandemic relief funding for SWD in particular that we talked about earlier. And so how can they think about a very specialized population of students? So let me give you a little bit of background. For these kids right now that we have, based off the December 1, 2020 child count, who have reached age 22 after September 30th, and are scheduled to complete high school in the spring of 2021, there are 596 students that meet this requirement right here, right? And so for some school divisions, our smaller ones, they might not have any kids. But for like a Fairfax, they might have, 75 of these students. So one, that's kind of the group of kids we're dealing with. Out of that group, less than 100 are being served by private school providers. So meaning that they are currently in a private school, like a North Star, like a Faison, like a Blue Ridge. And so the goal is saying, okay, you've got these kids that are eligible. Now that you've determined who's in your pot, how are you going to say, what do you want to use these funds for? And as you can see, this guidance, and that's what it is, it's guidance, it's not requirements, it's how we're helping folks to kind of sort through what might be the best way to approach this. And so thinking about that is, what did they miss out on over the last year that they need to recoup? Is it an IEP goal around an academic indicator? Is it vocational training or assessment? Is it a job placement opportunity that they lost because they couldn't get into an employer? And so the purpose of that guidance is to walk folks through that process. And so I will link the superintendent's memo in, and as soon as we release the application, we're also intended to issue some clarification points based off some questions we've received from the field. And so I'm hopeful, Claire, that'll kind of be a next step forward in helping folks to make sure that this is available. But I will say that Dr. Burnett's shop in particular and instructional services have been helping folks to walk through this process and just making sure. I feel like we've done a lot. We did a one-on-one meeting with special ed directors in May. around this topic, but we are seeing a little bit of kind of static for local schools, kind of figuring out what this looks like. And so that's something that actually Claire and I talked with some other advocacy organizations about last month. As a result of that, we've really upticked our information through Gov Delivery and Teacher Direct, as well as the training that we've offered across the summer to teachers and administrators to help make them more informed of this option. But I still think that there may be some confusion or folks just kind of figuring out what this looks like. Do not hesitate to have folks, parents you talk to, teachers you talk to, reach out to us. I think their SPED director is always a great resource, but if they don't get the information or if they're still unsure, please don't hesitate to direct them to the department. They can call the ombudsman or they can call our Office of Instructional Support Personnel also. So I'll link this information in here for you guys, and it includes the contact information for follow-up, as well as a copy of that guidance and superintendent's memo. That'd be great to share with folks to make sure they have the information. But yeah, Claire, we've heard the same thing, and we're trying to make sure that folks have this information. So hopefully the next rollout will contain some more specialized guidance and hopefully some scenarios that I think might help folks to figure this out. Thank you. Great question.
And Sam, this is Suzanne from Pizzi. We are helping lots of parents navigate this right now and getting a lot of pushback from schools where they have no idea how to do this. They're asking our parents if they have samples from any other families, and they really just don't have a plan. And I know that this is for next school year, but you know, our families are kind of panicked now, not knowing if their student is going to get, you know, be approved for this extra school year. The extra school year, or if they've got to find, you know, other plans for them next year. So it's one of those things where even though it is, y'all are giving guidance and stuff like, and more information, I understand you've already given information, but more information in the future, it is now that the schools are really giving pushback and saying, you know, we don't have anything planned, or we don't even know if we're going to do it. We have to check funding. These are the kinds of things that we're hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Appreciate that feedback. So a couple of things. One, if you guys become aware of any specific divisions that folks are getting pushback or just like miscommunication from, we'll be happy to follow up with those and keep it very general, right? So one. Two, part of our guidance also includes an example plan that a team could use. And so this is also linked in the superintendent's memo. I think it's a great way to help parents kind of think through this process in particular. And not that they have to fill this out, but maybe they're thinking about some of these areas that they think are concerns for them, particularly for the upcoming school year, in order to make sure their students are successfully transitioning as a result to 2020. And so this plan could really help them kind of wrap their heads around, this is what I think we should focus on. This is what's in my student's IEP. It's intended to be a tool that the team can use to kind of go through the process, but I think it could help parents organize their thoughts as well. And as far as the funding goes, you know, I mentioned it's $6.5 million. And so we can all do the math, right? 6.5 over 596 total kids, all of which might not want the option, need the option, whatever, but that's still a good amount of money for these students. I think the one concern that we've seen reflected is the fact that the budget language included a local match component. And so I do know that sometimes that's something that folks have a little bit of confusion over, but what it means is that depending upon the locality that you're working in, they may or may not, they may have an amount that they have to contribute. And as you can imagine, for smaller rural communities, it's a smaller piece of the pie. It really depends on your local composite index. It's a complete mess to kind of go through. But all of that being said, with all of the pandemic funding, we don't really think that that is a barrier. So we're happy to kind of help folks flesh out those conversations and concerns. And I will note that we've also seen some of the same patterns, Suzanne, like we dealt with a division out of Region 1 last week that we just kept getting calls about. So we went directly to them and kind of walked them through the process. It was one high school in particular that was struggling. So please don't hesitate to let us know how we can kind of help to support on both ends. But I do agree, and I think Claire's point is that as well, we need to make sure that parents and families are aware of this option, and they're really putting those conversations into place to say, hey, listen, this is what we want to focus on. This is what we think the team should talk about. So let's get together and hash this out. But thanks, guys. Great feedback. And I'm sorry, Brian, I'm aware of the time, so I'm gonna go on mute. I know we're leading up to a break, but I'm gonna be with you guys for a little bit more this morning. So please don't hesitate to reach out on anything I didn't get a chance to address.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hollins. All right, let's go ahead and take a 11-minute break. So we'll start back up at 10:17. If that's good with everybody, we'll see you in a little bit. Hello, everyone. We'll move forward with our next presentation. We have Deborah Johnson, specialist with intellectual disabilities from the VDOE, and Sharon Seiler, the alternate assessment specialist from VDOE, to give us an update on the new VAP. So I'll let you guys go ahead. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As Brian said, I'm Deborah Johnson. I'm a specialist at the Department of Ed for Intellectual Disabilities, and Sharon Seiler is with us as well from the Assessment Department, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about the new alternate assessment. So I'm going to turn it over to Sharon, and she'll get us started.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Deborah. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Are you able to? Yeah, I see thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you. As Deborah said, I'm Sharon Seiler, and I do work in our testing office. And I would describe myself as a special educator who's working in testing, rather than a testing person who knows something about special education. I've been blessed to be in the field of special education and see it from so many different vantage points. As a teacher, as a special education director, as a building level administrator, as a technical assistant provider in TTAC, as a member of the VDOE staff in special education and in testing. And I used to tell people that I'd done everything there was in special education except retire. But I managed to do that in 2015, but came back to the department in 2019 to work specifically on the VAP, and just really delighted and grateful this morning to have the opportunity to give you a introductory look. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide this committee with a general introduction into the new Virginia Alternate Assessment Program. And I do want you to keep in mind, and I invite you to have the perspective that this new VAP is still a work in progress. And what that means is that there may be questions that you have that we don't have answers to, that we're working on answers to. So it is very much a work in progress. So to get started here, the topics that Deborah and I hope to cover is, first of all, to give you an overview of the VAP, to look at the old VAP, and then to look at the sharp turn we're making in the road to develop a new Virginia Alternate Assessment Program. And hopefully in that discussion, for you to have an idea of why we are making this shift and where we see ourselves going forward. We're also going to be talking about the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning. And you're going to see the term VSAL. The VSALs are the content standards that the new VAP is going to be based on. These new standards are the content that we expect teachers to offer to students in the classroom. And Deborah's going to be doing that part of the presentation this morning. Then I'm going to come back and give you a snapshot of what the new test is going to look like. And it does look very different from our old VAP. But I'm going to give you a basic overview of the test design for the new VAP assessment. And then we're going to end up with some frequently asked questions. And if there's time, there's something that we would like you to help us with, but we're going to get to all of that shortly. So let's start out with an overview of the old VAP and the new VAP. So if we look back to the 2000-2001 school year, that's when the VAP was originally implemented as a portfolio-based test, our state assessment for students with significant cognitive needs. And the VAP has gone through several different shifts. The early version of the VAP was actually closely aligned with students' IEP goals. And we focused on best practices such as community-based instruction, interaction with non-disabled peers, instruction in a variety of settings. But later versions, and this was actually required by USDOE, we shifted to an academic focus where we looked at general education content standards that were reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity. So in the case of Virginia, of course, we were looking at our standards of learning. And so as we move forward, you can go to the next slide, Deborah. Even though the VAP changed in focus over time, the design of the test was always a portfolio-based test made up of student evidence in a collection. And that's really key, because what that means is that for the last 20 years, the VAP has been a portfolio-based test. So what we have currently now, and we are about to end our relationship with a portfolio-based test, but for the 2021 school year, the VAP was a portfolio-based test that looked at academic standards derived from the standards of learning in grades 3 through 8 in high school, in the content areas of reading, writing, math, science, and history, social science. And of course, those standards had been reduced in complexity and in depth. And the current VAP, those content standards are referred to as the ASOLs, or the Aligned Standards of Learning. However, this school year is going to be the last school year that we use a portfolio design for the VAP. And it's also going to be the last school year that the ASOLs are going to be used. Now, you may ask, and the parents that you work with may ask, why this change? And here is the answer. On February 5 of 2019, as a result of the peer review process, which is a process at USDOE where they really look very closely at each state's assessment program. And in Virginia's review, we were notified that the portfolio design of our VAP did not meet, if you could go back, Deborah.
All right.
That's all right. That the portfolio design of the VAP did not meet the requirements of the Every Student Succeeds Act. ESSA. And USDOE, in that correspondence to Virginia, advised Virginia of 3 very important things. One, and I say the term advised because the more accurate word may be required. They required Virginia to redesign or replace our portfolio-based VAP. Secondly, they also required or advised us to provide evidence to USDOE that of our plans by January 5 of 2021. And you'll see a little asterisk there on the slide. Because of the pandemic, they did give us an extension to share our plans with them until January of 22. But the second requirement did not change because of the pandemic. And that second requirement was that we needed to implement our new VAP by the 21-22 school year, which is, of course, the upcoming school year. Okay, so 3 important criteria or requirements. So VDOE's response to that correspondence from USDOE, first of all, in the fall of 2019, and that's when I came back to the department, was to create an internal team to start to plan and work with our new VAP. And that internal team was composed of staff members from the assessment office as well as the special education office. We also conferred with the National Center for Educational Outcomes, NCEO, as well as USDOE. And at that time in fall of 2019, we also developed a work plan that would allow us to meet the USDOE due dates and deadlines so that we could have a test ready to be administered to students in 2021-22. So going forward, in the winter and spring of 2020, we began a search, an arduous search for a partner, looking for another state or a consortium of states that could partner with Virginia to develop a new test. And I'll just say, to develop a new state assessment program is quite a task. And we wanted partnership. So I called state assessment directors and staff across the state. And I can say that in making those many cold calls, that we have some very generous, wonderful people working in state departments of education across this country. But our search really ended, and we found a partner that we thought was a good match for the Virginia program and the direction that we wanted to go in. And that was the behavioral research and teaching. You're going to see the initials BRT probably throughout this presentation, but we decided to partner with BRT at the University of Oregon and the Oregon Department of Education. Okay, and so summer and fall, our first step was to look at the content standards, and BRT had a process where they could take general education and contents and general education content standards, in this case, our standards of learning in reading, math, and science, and go through that process of reducing that content to make it relevant, accessible, and appropriate for students with significant cognitive needs. And so we developed those new academic standards for the VAP that are going to be referred to as the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning, or the VSOLs. That process really involved practitioners and teachers from across the state, Department of Education staff. In that process, we had 20 special education teachers from 27 school divisions to help us in that effort, as well as getting special education feedback. We also sought out general education feedback on the VSOLs internally from our Division of Learning and Innovation, and that is our instruction department. Okay, and so here we are, winter and spring of 2021. We have started to develop the reading, math, and science test forms. We established a stakeholder group, and Mike Garrison is a member of that group, but we convened a stakeholder committee to really gain feedback, diverse perspectives, and advice as we were developing the test. We also brought special education teachers back in again to conduct a study to see if the VSOLs that we had developed really aligned with the test items. And so we also, and much of this work is going on at the same time, but we began our efforts to introduce the new VSOL, the new VAP to the field, meaning division directors of testing, special education directors, teachers, and school staff, and to develop instructional resources, because we knew that teachers were going to need some instructional support and guidance as they began to teach the new content. And so here we are. The VAP, as I said, to start with, very much a work in progress. At this point, we have completed the development of the content standards for the new VAP in reading, math, and science. We've had teachers involved in 2 studies, a validation study to look at the appropriateness of those VSOL standards, an alignment study where teachers look to see if the content matched the test items. We've established our stakeholder group, and at this point we've had two meetings with them. And we also completed an accessibility review of test items. And that allows us to make sure that the test items are going to be accessible, particularly to students with visual issues. And so right now, the tasks that are in progress is that we're actually developing the test forms across the 3 content areas. We started back in May to do introductory presentations. Even though the VAP is far from finished, we wanted the field to at least see what we had done, so we and where we were going. So we started to develop and present widely to the field. And we also, what's still in progress now is the development of the curricular resources, which Deborah's going to talk a little bit about later. But our TTACs have taken on that task and partnered with us as we focus on the assessment. They are focusing on the curricular resources. So where we see ourselves going in terms of next steps for the summer and fall now is to really focus on training. This is going to be a sharp turn in the road for the field. So we know that training really has to be at the forefront as we enter the new school year, as well as those instructional resources. So those two important pieces, training and resources, are our focus right now in the summer, so that those things can be ready to roll as school gets ready to start. So in winter and spring, we will be preparing, school divisions will be preparing for the first administration of the test. That's probably going to be sometime late spring. And then, of course, in the summer, after the test is over, the tests will be scored, and there'll be a reporting of those those scores. So hopefully that gives you a snapshot of our journey, where we see ourselves going. And Deborah is going to come and kind of zero in on the VSOLs and the process for their development. And then I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the test itself and what the test looks like. Okay, thank you. Deborah?
Okay. As you heard Sharon mentioned earlier, back in the fall of 2020, we pulled together, it was work that was done with BRT and BDOE personnel. We worked with Virginia teachers to use the what they call the essentialization process that BRT had developed to create our new standards for the VAP. And as she said, these are referred to as the Virginia Essentialized Standards of Learning. Just to let you all know, and because some people have asked, we did have those 27 teachers, I think, that Sharon mentioned earlier, that we had pulled together. We had representation from across the Commonwealth. We had representation from each one of the superintendent's regions. So we worked real hard on making sure that we had teachers from all over the state that were helping in that development process. And then we, as allowed by US DOE, this essentialization process involved taking our standards of learning in the areas of reading, math, and science, and we reduced them in depth, breadth, and complexity, and to identify academic content, as Sharon said earlier, which was relevant, accessible, and appropriate for our students with significant cognitive disabilities. So this is just an example of what the VSOLs look like and how they were reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity. You can see on this is a third grade math, and you can see there's a third grade standard, standard of learning. And to the right, in the right-hand box, you will see that the VSOL, how it reads. So it was significantly, as you can see, reduced in both depth, breadth, and complexity. Same thing, this is an example of grade 5 reading. And you will see that that SOL has several bullets, and those were taken together and actually reduced down to the one VSOL that you see next to it. So it went from summarizing, discussing the plot, and describing character development down to identify a character, setting, or event in a story read to a student. Here's an example from grade 11. Again, biology, the science has quite a bit of information in just one standard. And so it was reduced to what you see to the right, So this was talking about what I don't how how what plants need to grow the photosynthesis process. So it was reduced from that very complex SOL to the VSOL that you see there. And the same thing with another grade 11 science. Again, this very involved SOL standard was reduced to the VSOL to the right. So as you can see, there was a lot, and there was a lot that went into this. We had a lot of review from not only our teachers across the state, but also our folks within DOE and the instruction department. Okay, Sharon.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to be coming back to some of those same standards, those VSOLs that Deborah talked about, but really I want to now kind of broaden the perspective to show how those standards actually look in test items. So we do know that this new test is going to be available really similar to the old one in terms of the participation. The participation criteria is the same. So it's going to be, the new test is going to be available to eligible students based on the participation criteria with significant cognitive disabilities in grades 3 through 8 and high school. Again, in the 3 content areas of reading, mathematics, and science. And this new test, of course, is not going to be a portfolio-based test, but it is going to be a test that has an online platform. So students are it's going to include test items with 3 answer options. Now, usually when we say that it's an online test, the first image that comes to mind is that all of these students are going to be expected to interact directly with the computer, maybe be in a group setting like the SOL test is given. That's really not the case here, because even though the test items are going to be presented online and answer options can also be entered by the teacher. And we understand that some students are not going to be able to interact with the computer. And so in those cases, those students can be provided with a paper copy of the item. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of flexibility, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But one of the key aspects of the design of the new VAP is that test items, most of the test items are going to be read to the student by the examiner, or there is a text-to-speech option that can also be used. So students are not going to be required to navigate or have reading skills to be able to demonstrate what they know. So in terms of the flexibility that we see in the test, it will offer multiple and diverse ways for a student to respond or to demonstrate their knowledge. So we may have students who choose their answer options from the computer directly, or they select their answer options from the test being presented on paper. We may have, students may also use assistive technology. And of course, we know that many students in this population do use assistive technology. So that, of course, is going to be allowed and welcomed on the test. Teachers and examiners, and this is probably an important point here, that teachers and examiners may enter the answer options selected by their students based on their preferred response modality. And what that means is, let's say that the response modality is a verbal response where the student can't mark a paper test or choose an answer option off of the computer screen, but they can verbalize a response. So in those cases, the examiner would be able to hear that verbal response by the student and then enter the answer option on the computer platform. Some students may indicate their answer option by pointing or by head movement or by eye gaze. Again, in those cases, a teacher would be allowed to enter the answer option selected by the student. So when we look at what the test items actually look at, and this slide is the same as the one Deborah just presented to you, where we have on the left-hand side is the standard of learning, and that's been reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity. So the VSOL that we would be assessing in this case is the student's ability to add and subtract whole numbers up to 20. And so here's what a test item might look like, where the student is given an addition problem, 6 + 8 = blank, and then there are 3 answer options, 8, 10, or 14. Okay, that's an example of 3rd grade math. Here again, we go to 5th grade reading as another example. That SOL has been distilled to a VSOL, which is to identify a character, setting, or event in a story read to the student. And here's what a test item might look like based on that VSOL. So the student is read this text. Ben likes to bake bread. What does Ben bake? And you can see that the passage or the story is very short, very straightforward. And then to support the student in their answer options of apple, oven, or bread, there are also pictures attached, again, to support the student's identification of the correct response here. And so throughout the test items, you're going to see, or the student is going to see picture support for many of the items. So let's look at grade 11 science. Again, this very complex standard of learning that talks about chemical and biochemical processes, molecules, photosynthesis, has all been distilled down to a VSOL that is stated to recognize that plants need light, air, and water to grow and create energy through photosynthesis. So an item around this particular VSOL might look like this. Again, a very straightforward STEM, which plant will likely grow better? And the student is presented with 3 answer options: a picture showing a plant that's receiving water and sunlight, a picture of a plant without water and sunlight in the shade, and then option B, a plant that has just sunlight. Okay, as the 3 answer options for the student. Okay. So now what of course we're not seeing here is how the items are going to appear on the Pearson platform. And what I mean by Pearson is our provider for all of our state assessments, the SOL test. And so because it is an online platform, there are many embedded features in that platform that will make those items more accessible to students. But our main point this morning is to give you an idea of what that 3-answer option format is going to look like for students. Okay. So Deborah, you want to come back with our frequently asked questions?
Okay, these are some of the frequently asked questions that we have gotten so far through the field, and we thought we'd share them with you. The first one being, what is the differences between the old and the new VAP? And as you heard Sharon say before, the old VAP was a portfolio style that was a collection of evidence, the students' work that was assessed in the content areas. And at that time, it was all of the content areas, actually, reading, math, writing, and social science and science. The new VAP, though, will be composed of just test questions with 3 answer choices for the 3 content areas of reading, mathematics, and science. And as you've heard Sharon say, the test questions will be based on VSOLs with varying levels of complexity. So another difference between the old VAP and the new VAP is that the old VAP was, that collection of evidence was collected throughout the school year. So it was administered throughout the school year, whereas the new VAP will be administered in the spring and most likely will be administered individually to students. Also, as many as you know, the old VAP was locally scored by school divisions. School divisions just scored them. The scores were entered into Pearson, and then there was an audit done later on. The new VAP will be scored by the online test delivery system or delivery software.
Deborah, you're on mute.
You just went right back on mute, Deborah.
Yeah, you're still on mute.
Okay, can y'all hear me now? Okay. Just quickly going back, difference between the old and the new VAP. The old VAP was a portfolio style. The collections of evidence were work samples from the students that were collected throughout the school year. The new VAP will be an online assessment that is going to be made up of 3 answer choices in the content areas of reading, math, and science. And the test will be based on the VSOL with varying levels of complexity. As I said before, the old VAP was pretty much administered throughout the school year. The new VAP is going to be administered in the spring and most likely will be administered individually to students. Also, the old VAP was scored by school divisions. It was scored by school divisions. School divisions had to enter their scores, I believe, in Pearson, and then later on, there was an audit done of that as well. But the new VAP will be scored by the online test delivery software. Second question that we have had is, how will the students with significant cognitive disabilities participate in the new VAP? Again, as I said, it's expected that most students will be tested individually with multiple and flexible ways to demonstrate their knowledge. The test items will be presented online, but students may also be able to use a paper copy of the items if needed. The support of assistive technology and alternative communication modes, such as what Sharon mentioned earlier, the verbal responses, pointing, head movement, eye gaze, and allowable response are allowable response options. Also, the presentation accommodations such as magnification, the read aloud, text to speech, they're also allowable as well. Who can participate in the new VAP? I think Sharon mentioned this earlier on in the presentation as well. The criteria for participation in the new VAP has not changed. It will be it's the same criteria for the old VAP. It's going to be available for students who are eligible with significant cognitive disabilities in grades 3 through 8 in high school, who again are working on those academic standards that have been reduced in depth and complexity. And again, remember that eligibility for participation in the alternate assessment is determined by the IEP team using the VAP participation criteria. Again, students with disabilities served by 504 plans are not eligible for the VAP, and that is nothing new. That's been the same. Will the VSOLs replace the Aligned Standards of Learning? You heard Sharon say that earlier. Yes, the VSOLs will replace the ASOLs in reading, math, and science starting in this new school year, the 2021-22. Will curricular resources be available for instruction of the VSOL? Yes, curricular resources have been developed, and we are in the midst of doing some fine tuning of them, but they have been developed by our wonderful folks at our Training and Technical Assistance Centers, or TTACs, at Virginia Commonwealth University, James Madison, George Mason, ODU, and Virginia Tech. And these resources are going to be available on TTAC Online this summer. Like I said, we're in the final stages of getting them ready to be posted. Sharon?
Thanks so much, Deborah. I realize I'm keeping my eye on the time. So I know we have maybe 14 minutes left, but this is the question that we wanted you to respond to in regards to this new test. We realize that you are in the field, you're working with parents, you're helping parents navigate the new VAP plus many other topics and issues. So we'd like you to step into the role of being a little mini focus group for us and respond to this question as to what are the most important questions that parents would want VDOE to answer. We are in the throes of producing 3 documents for parents, specifically for parents, that we want to post on our website. One is going to be a parent video that Sam Hollins from special education and our assistant superintendent from assessment are going to be covering the information, much of what I've shared here with you today. That's one product we hope to have available for parents, and we want to do a parent brochure that speaks to the new VAP and what it will entail in a very succinct manner. But we also have developed a draft parent Q&A or frequently asked questions document. But we want to make sure that in those documents that we have covered the ground, covered the territory that needs to be covered. So we definitely want your response to this question because it will be very helpful to us. But before we do that, I want to ask, are there any questions about anything that Deborah and I shared, knowing that that might be something that we need to resolve first if we can, before you respond to this question? So questions from you.
As the teacher representative, I'm sure you know that the teachers across the state have a lot of questions as we move forward. And I'm sure that you guys are totally working on that and are preparing for us when we come back in the fall to give us some questions or some answers. And one of the first things I was curious about is, as you prepare the parent Q&A, will you be preparing a teacher Q&A, or do you already have one in the works?
Yeah, we do have a teacher frequently asked question document already posted to our website. We did an introductory training for teachers in May.
Right.
And a recording of that presentation is on the website, as well as a teacher frequently asked questions. Yes,
So
ma'am.
after those, because I know that after we all went to those in-services, more questions were generated from that. And so I was wondering, your teacher Q&As based on all those questions that were already presented to you guys?
Yes, yes. You know, one of the things that we've decided to do is, because, for lack of a better word, this is such a sharp turn in the road,
right,
that we couldn't give all the training at one time, because it's honestly too much to take in. So we've decided to, and we have developed a module training that is going to focus on the instructional part of it, the assessment part, and those it's a pretty aggressive training schedule, but it breaks down breaks down the content, hopefully in digestible portions for the field. So
And
that will start, yes, at the
Yeah,
beginning of the school year.
Yeah, we're in the process of developing those trainings now, or those modules now, and something should be coming out soon.
Yeah.
Yes, I know is one of the concerns for the teachers, because they were given the extension until to the January 20 of the 22, from August until December, the trainings that we need to help make sure that our children are prepared for the spring.
Yeah, we definitely hear that message, and that's why we've developed a training schedule that you'll be hearing about pretty soon.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I do have a question for you guys. I think you all remember Tracy's presentation of critical decision points, where parents were kind of informed of the outcome or the consequences of not participating in the SOLs. When a student is being referred to participate in the VAP assessment. One of the consequences was that outside of the educational setting, the VAP has no, or the diploma that leads, or the VAP leads to a certain diploma has no value in the working place. My question is a really practical question that a lot of parents are asking at this point. What are you going to do to make the diploma more applicable, so that students with a disability, who have a severe cognitive disability, are able to participate in the workplace? Because that is so crucial for the well-being of the child, or later the young adult, because they want to participate, they want to be productive. The opportunities are not very great right now. And so, my heart breaks. We are revamping the VAP. We are having all these great ideas, but what is the practical outcome for our students? Are they able to get into employment later on, or are we making it more harder for them to get there? So that is my big question. And I work with a lot of families as a school social worker, and also being on the Sseac. And those are the questions that a lot of parents have.
Yeah. I'd certainly like my colleagues, Deborah and others, to weigh in on that question, but I'll tell you my take, having been a teacher of this population and seeing the VAP over the past 20 years since its inception at the very beginning. The current VAP, I believe, will better prepare students in this population for the workplace, particularly because the curriculum has been expanded. With the old VAP, even though there were many SOLs, teachers could select a bullet in each of the reporting categories. And what that really resulted in is that the curriculum, or what students were taught, was really narrow. I think that students are going to benefit in very significant and meaningful ways by having the curriculum expanded. And so what that will mean is that they will have access and the opportunity to learn more of some basic academic skills that is going to create the foundation for work in a post-school environment, more so than what we saw in the old VAP. You know, the adage, which is an unfortunate one, that what gets tested gets taught. So if we expand the test to include many more standards of learning, even though they've been reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity, it's still the full scope of the standards of learning made more appropriate, relevant, and accessible. So I start thinking in the long run, students are going to be taught more, they're going to learn more, and they're going to be better prepared from a practical standpoint. Yeah.
Sharon, when you look at the DSM-5, we have 3 categories of severe cognitive disability. We have the severe and profound, which have an IQ of 35 and below. Then we have the middle ones between 35 and 55. And then we would have the moderate deficit, which is the higher level of cognitive disability or intellectual disability, with 56 to 70. So not every school district is going by those guidelines. And so we have school district where students have a IQ of maybe 75 or 82. They'll put those students on the VAP. So if you look at the bandwidth of IQs, if you have a student who has a 35 IQ, they are really, really limited, and they can only learn a certain amount. But if you have a student with an 82 or 70 IQ, and that student is on the VAP, there is, the higher likelihood that that student is able to learn more is much higher. So we have these, categories of students, and we all put them on the VAP. And so I feel kind of, there needs to be something in between. We have the standard diploma, and then we have the VAP. I feel kind of we are failing our students who are in the higher categories. Say students with a 55 and 82 IQ. Those are the students, who can learn, maybe, but they don't get the degree that they needed. And I think it's so crucial for their quality of life later on in life, that they can able to participate and be productive and have a placement to work. So there's so many things that I see is missing, and I'm really heartbroken, especially through the pandemic, because some of our students have to go now on the VAP because a year of not having all this support in place is now really detrimental for them to participate on the SOLs. So there's so many things that I feel kind of is missing here.
Yeah. You really bring up so many issues.
It's
And
systemic, I think.
yeah, many of them are systemic and really not limited to the narrow focus of the test. It's about expectations that we
And
have of
application.
students. Yeah, and application. It's about policy, but it's also about participation. And the pandemic, I'm hoping, and can I say praying, that it has not created students that are deemed VAP participants, because the participation criteria for the VAP is really to identify a very narrow group of students who are not end up as participants because of the lack of instruction due to the pandemic. That would be a travesty. And I believe my colleagues in special ed have a handle on the number of students.
If I could, we need to remember that students, just because people think that they're not going to do well on the SOL test, and that does not make them eligible to take the VAP. You have to be found eligible to take the alternate assessment. And as part of that eligibility process, the IEP team has got to demonstrate this student has a significant cognitive disability.
And that is
the significant cognitive disability is not based off of a single IQ score. Okay, you need to be looking at the whole student. We have guidelines out there for that. But yeah, it's one of these situations where, and we've been trying to work with our divisions to understand that you do not, just because a child cannot, you don't think, or the IEP team doesn't think that the child is going to be successful with the SOLs, that automatically puts them into the Virginia Alternate Assessment Program. That is not the case.
Deborah, I respectfully disagree with you on that. I have been sitting on those meetings and fighting for these kids, and it is not, it's basically on the IQ score, and even that is different from county to county. We have counties with a 55 and below IQ, and then adaptive scores are 55 and below. They are really, but then we have counties who are not holding on to that.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Marguerite. I know that's happening. We do. I think I presented to you guys several years ago on the VAP and that 1% cap that is on the states. We still have students, and through our monitoring process that we've done through Jeff Fennessy's department at DOE, we've had divisions going back and taking a good hard look at what students they have that are actually participating in the VAP. And unfortunately, what we have found, we still have students that are participating in the VAP that are not
qualified,
probably should not have been found eligible. I'm talking about students who, if you look at the IQ score, they got IQ scores up in the 70s. We've got students, we've got students that have been identified as specific learning disability that have been taking the VAP. So it's that kind of, we know that is an issue out there. We are trying to work with our divisions to get them to understand that it is not, if you do not, that's a no-no. If you don't think that the child can participate in the SOLs and you put them into the VAP, that's not how it works. But you're right, that is still happening out in the divisions.
But I am curious, based on those kids, like Marguerite just said, our kids with the IQs of 55 to 70 up to 80. At one point, I'm trying to think how to word this. the VAP is for our significantly impaired children. And that, I think you guys are doing an amazing job putting this together so quickly. That's the first thing I want to say. And I've been very impressed with all of the research that you did to help us find the appropriate partnerships that we needed to do this in such a quick manner. But our students who have, some of our students whose IQ may actually look lower than what their abilities are due to maybe being students with autism, and they have scatter skills. So maybe they will have higher abilities than this new VSO is going to show. And they might actually be able to do more than 0 through 20, you know, in math. They may be able to go higher, but simply it seems like that's limiting a little bit. And I thought at one point it was kind of under explained that maybe it was going to go on this same kind of computer-based programming as the MAP testing, you know, where it's based on their abilities, so we can actually see what the kids, their true knowledge in the areas in which we're testing them. Does that make sense how I'm trying to explain it?
Yes,
because
the new VAP is not a computer adaptive test, meaning that there's an algorithm behind the test. So if you get one wrong, it will choose, the algorithm chooses the next item. So the new VAP is not that kind of online test, but it is a test that will begin with lower or easier items, and then go to medium complexity items, and then for more complex items as the test goes forward. So within that range, within that continuum of item difficulty, for lack of a better word, or complexity of items, hopefully for the range of the diversity that is within the 1% population, not the kids that aren't supposed to be there, but for the true diversity within the 1% population, that the test will appropriately meet those needs. And I see a hand raised. Michael, you've been really patient.
I try, Sharon. Yeah, I wanted to go back to your question. You said you wanted to give us some, you know, things to help with what parents might be asking. And I put in the chat over there about the portfolio piece. That's why they are changing to this. And I want to make sure that people understand that the portfolio assessment process is not necessarily a flawed process. So I think as you're saying this historically to make the change, that it's not that the portfolio is a flawed assessment process, because it's a great thing for teachers to use because it shows growth over time. And it's so easy to show that as a teacher, to say, okay, here's what your child did September, October, November, and so on. So I would hope that we make sure that we're very clear that that assessment is still a good assessment process, but that we were told that we need to go to another way of looking at assessing those students. So again, that's something I think parents might ask them to make sure that people understand that really was a good assessment process. It's just that we are using a different process now.
And it served us well for 20 years, Michael.
Absolutely. That was my point. I wanted to make sure people understood that was a good process.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks so much for offering that, Michael. I really appreciate it. I think this has been a great discussion. In case you missed it, we have transitioned to our facilitated discussion on VAP, I think, because you guys have such great questions. And I know we might have some more, but I do want to take a brief pause. You know, in planning for this morning in particular, Mike Garrison, who has sat on the committee to help advise this work, has just been invaluable, not only as a Sseac member, but obviously given his experiences and expertise. I just want to take a moment to thank you all. I think I speak for Dr. Seiler and for Deb in saying that it's just been great to have Sseac engage with us at such an early stage in this, and to pivot so quickly, given the communication we have from the feds that doesn't always fall out in a timeline that works for us. we've just really relied on you all, and I think you've helped us to shape the conversations and continue to shape the technical assistance and support that we offer. But I do want to pause briefly. Mike, I'd love for you to jump in, and I know this was something that was on your mind as you and I were chatting during the course of the committee's work, and wanting to make sure that we were linking up with Sseac and giving folks some good nuggets to take back to their regions. Do you want to weigh in really quickly and just share a little bit about your experience and what's kind of been going through your mind during this time?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It really was an honor to be involved in the process. I've done a lot of pre-launch stuff in the business world, but I've never ever been involved on the educational side. So it was great from a personal development standpoint. I also wanted to say that what I really enjoyed about the VAP committee that Sharon was running was we got to do these breakout sessions. It was really awesome to be able to have that opportunity to go away and talk about things. So that was absolutely kudos to you guys. The big thing that I wanted, the reason I wanted Sam and everybody to bring this up today was, you know, those of us that are in the Sseacs and so many of you guys that are involved in local IEPs, we all know that at the end of the day, that local IEP team has got to be able to talk about this effectively, you know, and you know, I'm very passionate about making sure that we support everyone in the process. I just know that that if we at the state Sseac can take the lead on sharing what's appropriate and sharing it as early as possible, it's going to be the best thing for all the kids, right? That if we can remove as much fear as possible, it's one of my favorite expressions when it comes to running a good business. Like if you really want to take care of a client, if you can eliminate or remove any possible fear before they talk to you, you're going to have more effective communication. And that's where I think we need to take advantage of our empathy as state Sseac people, is understand that parent may not have access to the information that we even have here at the state Sseac level. That parent may not emotionally be in a position. I certainly have at different times in my 15 years as a parent, you know, in the system. They may not have the emotional stuff. So the quicker we can get out in front of this, the quicker we can make parents feel like they have enough time to understand this. I know Sharon's on top of it. This is our third conversation about this, Sharon, I think, about VAP and everything. You know, I know you guys are on top of it, but I just wanted to get all of us involved as much as possible. So thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. Thanks, Sharon, and everybody on the committee.
Thank you, Mike. I think that's such a great perspective. And I think today's just been another example of some of the questions and considerations that come up in the forefront. And quite frankly, we are using this as kind of a continuous stream of information and data to support our work moving forward. You know, one thing I do want to offer Sharon and Deb an opportunity to talk about is some of the deliverables that they've created as part of this process and where they see it moving forward. We've already talked that there are going to be some additional kind of more parent-friendly resources, as well as videos that we're going to do, and a continuing outreach to our teachers in particular with the startup of the 21-22 school year. And so I do want to pause and just make sure we have some additional questions answered. We have, I think, about 25 minutes left. And so I'll be monitoring the chat too to help moderate in a way. But Sharon and Deb, I didn't know if you all wanted to weigh in on any additional resources that folks should have their ear to the ground. I know we have some already available and more coming, but just as a way to kind of refresh folks what might be available as they reach out to their regions.
Right. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. I do want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more about our training that's coming up. As I mentioned, we are doing it in a modular fashion, which allows us to break the training up. We are doing presentations for special ed directors and division directors of testing. The first presentation for them, I believe, is like August 3rd or 4th. And then we're talking to a separate presentation for building principles and building level building level administrators. And that'll be is scheduled around that first week of August. And then we'll be doing, like we did in May, a series of teacher presentations after school, so we don't interfere with the instructional time, the instructional day. But one of the reasons why I think it's so important to mention that we're talking directly to central office level administrators, special eds and DDOTs, and building level administrators, is for them to understand the new program and to also discuss ways that they can support the instruction, that they can support the teachers, so that the teachers with such a big change facing them in terms of the content and the test, that they have specific support within their school divisions to make that to make that happen. And we wanted to make that happen in a very timely fashion. So that's why we're hitting the ground running that first week of August to start those presentations, so that before school starts, and we know that some school divisions are starting mid-August, while others are going to be starting the day after Labor Day, but wanted to get that training to those support people and leadership people out there as we were training teachers. So that's the first thing I'll say that I think is going to be very supportive for getting the tests implemented in an effective manner. Deborah, you want to jump in with some of the curricular?
Yes, our TTACs have been working very hard and have created some curricular resources for our teachers. They're kind of broken down into 3 different categories, I guess, is the best way to describe it. The first one is they have developed a crosswalk between our current, the newly developed VSOLs, that crosswalk over to the former ASOLs, that also crosswalk to some of the competencies in the Applied Studies Diploma curriculum framework or curriculum map. So part of the reason for doing this was to show teachers that they probably have quite a bit of material and quite a bit of material, supplies, whatever, that they had used previously with the ASOLs in their instruction, that they're still going to be able to use as part of their instruction with the new VSOLs. So that's number one, and that they've got that crosswalk for all content areas, and actually they've got it in a comprehensive document as well that includes them all if people just want the one content area, the one document. They have also created just like we had with on TTAC Online, we had some ASOL activities or lesson plans. They have also created some of those as well for the VSOLs. We do not have one, just like we did not have one for each ASOL. There is not one for each VSOL, but we do have some samples that will be coming out for you guys. Also, there is the third area, which is probably the most important piece, is something called instructional resources. And this is where they have gone in for every content area and have talked about best practices, evidence-based resources, all for instruction. In other words, here are some instructional resources on how you teach reading and literacy. So they have all that put together, as well as in the areas of math and science. So they will, all of these resources will be on TTAC Online for teachers to be able to access. And like I said, we're right now in the midst of getting all those resources finalized, because our plan is that they will be up on TTAC Online once these trainings, just before these trainings roll out with the teachers. So And as part of the trainings, as Sharon mentioned, TTAC will be going over all these different resources and helping folks to learn how to navigate them and what they're there for.
And we really think that that's important. If there are resources developed, then practitioners, educators across the state need to know that they're there. And so that's why that first round of training, TTAC is going to be with us to share where those are. And we can say from the earlier training that we did in May, we did I think 5 presentations, and they were maxed out every single presentation. So we know that teachers are with us, that division level staff are sharing the information, that these trainings are available, that the information is available. So the partnership has been invaluable. And as Mike said, you know, you all are in a position to partner with us by taking information back to your local advisory boards. And to be honest with you, we need the partnership. We want the partnership. Mike, I did see a question from you in the chat about the parent video. Do we have a timeline on that? I've got Sam booked and my assistant superintendent booked to start that recording next week. But
I didn't mean to put you
we'll
too much on
see.
the spot, but you knew it was coming after.
Yeah,
That video's got to happen for the parents.
Yeah, I've got a script written for them and everything so they can roll out. But
have you had a parent review it yet?
No, but we have had department liaison Tracy Lee, Gloria Dalton, our department staff review the parent brochure and the parent frequently asked questions. And I'm now, just as I'm in this meeting with you and hearing your question, my plan was to try to release all 3 of the parent products at the same time. The video, the parent FAQ, and the brochure. But now you've made me rethink that maybe because the video is going to take longer, maybe we should consider going ahead and doing the brochure and the parent FAQ, because that will at least give some information that they could have readily available quicker. So you've kind of got the wheels turning.
Yeah.
I would, with all respect and exquisite affection.
Exquisite affection. I love that.
Yeah, I was going for something. I don't know if I caught it or not, but I would highly recommend having anything you're producing for special education parents be run by a special education parent or 2 before you send it out. And not because of anything that I think you guys would do badly or anything like that, but it's a different population. It's your end user. And if there's anything I've learned in the business world, it's if I'm producing something for client facing, I always run it by a client. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Mike, I think that means you're volunteering, right?
Well, you do have me on the confidentiality already. So.
Yeah, that's right.
I was thinking, Mike, we could maybe run it by some of the other parents that have been on the work group or the stakeholder meeting. That may be a good idea.
Yeah, I would just respectfully submit that's a best practice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And Sharon, I know that we talked about this in the stakeholder group, but we're going to be posting those parent FAQs on DOE's website, but we also talked about getting them into the hands of the local directors, local school divisions, so that they could also post them on their local websites, because we think that parents are probably going to use those websites more frequently than they do DOE's website.
Right.
They generally find it less intimidating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we are, which may be helpful for the VDOE website, navigating, trying to put all of the new VAP stuff in one location. So if you click there, you're going to see the participation criteria. You're going to see our frequently asked questions. You're going to see the recordings, you know, so it's like shopping at Walmart, you know, get everything in one place.
And it's already been, the VAP webpage has already been updated to reflect the new VAP. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but if you go to DOE's homepage and you look to the far right, VAP has its own, own title down in the far right-hand corner of DOE's homepage. You click on that and it takes you to all the new stuff.
Right. And Sam has put up that link, so thank you, where if people want to go there and start to look.
I had a question about the testing window for the VAP assessment, and will that align with the same SOL testing window that school divisions have, or will it be prior to or afterwards?
Yeah. Our thought on that, Brian, is that the testing window, we want to make it longer than the SOL testing window. We haven't published a specific date, but we are looking at a much longer window, thinking that there are students that are going to need multiple test sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to take them much longer because they may only be able to do 3 or 4 items a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we will have a much longer testing window.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions for Sharon or Deborah or Mike or Sam?
Don't ask me any questions.
Oh, well, we're asking Mike all the questions.
I would just add that if you ever get invited to be on something like that, like being involved in that process, that it is absolutely worth your time. Really, really good experience. It was innovative.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. You know, I mean, as the opportunity presents himself, you know, I encourage all of you to jump on it and be a part of it, because what you know, the knowledge you bring to not only our committee, you know, would be beneficial to any help with the DOE as well. So. All right, well, Deborah and Sharon, thank you so much for your presentation and your update for us. We look forward to hearing more about the VAP in the coming weeks, it sounds like, and you know, over time, we will be certainly looking out for more information. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that will lead us to basically the end of our meeting for the day. I would like to thank everyone for their participation today. You know, tomorrow we have lots of good stuff going on. I do want people to make sure that to pay attention to public comments. You know, that's one of the main reasons why we're here, to listen to parents and other constituents and hear their concerns and things like that, as well as the constituency reports from all of us. You know, those are the things that are going to guide what we do throughout the year. So be aware of that. Be thinking of possible presentations we want to have for our next meeting as well. We'll talk about that tomorrow, and we'll also go over our report on dispute resolution, and I have assigned subcommittees and things like that, and we'll talk about that tomorrow as well. Does anyone have any final questions or thoughts?
Brian,
Yes.
I've just got maybe 2 questions related to the minutes. Maybe somebody who can volunteer and be at least thinking about it tonight, since I won't be able to join you in the morning.
I've taken care of that already.
Okay,
Marguerite
great.
said you would
Thank you,
go back to
Marguerite.
doing that.
Another question is, I would be happy to look over that if that would be helpful based on the recording and merge everything together. And do Lisa and I compare the notes that we're both taking? I don't know what the process has been.
So in the past, what we did is I would write the minutes and then send that to the chair and then compare the notes. Sometimes Christine would add things to it that I missed. And then that probably takes 2 or 3 days. And then we send everything to Lisa, and Lisa goes back to the recording, and then she is looking if we missed anything or if everything is also according to the standard in terms of how to post it and make it accessible for everyone. And then the minutes have to be in, I think, 5 days after the meeting. So what I would do, Patricia, I will write the minutes tomorrow afternoon, and then I send them to you as soon as I have them, and then you can compare that and with Brian's notes and go from there. Sounds good?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marguerite.
You're welcome.
All right, if there's no more discussion, I will adjourn the meeting for the day, and we will meet back tomorrow at 8 in the morning.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Team.
All right, Brian, can you stay on for a second?
Sure.
Everybody.
Bye all.
My eyes are
How
going.
did it go? Good job.
Thank you. I thought it went well. I was happy
Yeah,
with it.
it went really well.